Welcome back to the channel. This is Trendy Storm and you are watching What If Naruto Got the Blacklight Virus by Kyuubi after Sasuke Retrieval arc. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Not wasting no more time, let's start the story.
Boom. Two strong attacks clashed in a struggle for survival, resulting in a huge explosion heard from the Valley of the End. Initially, the battlefield was only covered in dust. What took place? Who made it out alive? Who will make it out of the fog alive? In any case, who the devil is fighting? The tension became nearly intolerable. However, the dust gradually settled, revealing a lone figure standing over his fallen enemy. This figure had blonde hair, 3 whisker marks on each cheek, and was dressed in an orange jumpsuit. Sasuke Uchiha, his treacherous former teammate, was defeated by Naruto Uzumaki. Naruto glanced down at his fallen enemy with a small smirk. It was an extremely close battle. Even after his Sharingan fully matured in the middle of battle, Naruto had been able to keep up with Sasuke with ease in the beginning. I know it's not what really happened, but fuck you, it's my FIC. Sasuke was only able to keep Naruto on his toes for a short while after he used his curse seal. Naruto had to use a small portion of the Kyuubi's nearly infinite chakra, which had been sealed inside him since birth, to combat this. Naruto was able to summon his one-tailed form and level the battle after Sasuke activated his second stage of his curse seal, which caused him to change into a demonic, vampire-like creature with 2 hand-shaped wings that allowed flight, as if he didn't already have enough problems. Sasuke's Chidori was ultimately defeated by Naruto's Rasengan in a final simultaneous attack, and he was flung into the enormous statue of his ancestor Madara Uchiha. He made another feeble attempt to attack Naruto, but this caused his curse seal to fade. After dissipating the red chakra he was using, Naruto effortlessly caught the worn-out Uchiha's punch, smashed it back into his face, grabbed his head, and dipped it in the river they were fighting on. He struggled for a few seconds before Naruto pulled the oxygen-depraved, unconscious Uchiha out of the water and dragged him to the shore. Naruto was relieved to discover that Sasuke was still alive when he checked his pulse before the dust settled. All of this took place. Naruto muttered under his breath, panting from exhaustion, and fucking stay down this time. He looked amusedly around the old site that had been transformed into a battlefield. As he brushed the dust and gravel from his jumpsuit, he remarked, "Well, aside from destroying a historically significant landmark, job well done." He glanced down at his friend who had lost. Naruto started using ninja wire to restrain said Teme, saying, "Now then, it's time to drag your sorry runaway ass back home." But our blonde hero didn't know he was being watched. "I can't believe I wrote that." He recognized the man who was observing him. After all, he was his sensei Kakashi Hitaki. The notorious copy ninja was observing from the surrounding trees. As much expression as is possible for someone who covers 3/4 of his face. The Cyclopean Jonin eyed his students with a variety of expressions. There was a look of deep concern, another of hatred and rage. He thought angrily, look at him, gloating over his achievement and almost killing his own teammate with his demonic chakra. Yes, he did genuinely despise Naruto in spite of all of his talk of friendship and cooperation, as well as the fact that he had raised the boy and looked out for him. Like the haughty villagers, he held Naruto responsible for the deaths of loved ones, specifically, his teammate Rin and his sensei Minato Namikaze, the Yondaime Hokage and Naruto's father, during Kyuubi's attack on Konoha almost 13 years ago. He tried to see Naruto as a person and a hero for years, because that was his dying sensei's final wish for the entire village. But when Naruto used Kyuubi's chakra to defeat Haku in Wave Country, he started to have his doubts. Kakashi made an effort to remember that the boy's rage over Sasuke's apparent death might have simply led to a mistake after all. Naruto was usually adept at managing his own feelings. However, he was now certain that the figure in the valley was not Naruto. The Kyuubi was the one. "Kakashi, you okay?" a voice asked from his right. The Cyclops turned to face Pakun, his devoted ninja tracker dog, who was the source of the voice. Pakun's size was ridiculous, but his loyalty more than made up for it. Being a skilled tracker, the small dog had guided Kakashi to the battlefield in time to witness the dust being settled. The Jonin's voice was even as she said, "I'm fine, Pakun, just have a lot on my mind." He had to use all of his self-control not to shake with rage. It was unfair. What made the Hokages stand up for this monster? In him, what did they see? Did he hypnotize the Sandaime, I wonder? The Godem? Does being around him cause people to change? He recalled Zabuza, who gave his life to kill Gato after Naruto told him how much Haku admired him, and why everyone he meets has life-altering epiphanies that totally transform their lives. He recalled how the Wave people rebelled against Gato after Naruto gave young Inari hope. He recalled hearing about Neji's total personality change following his altercation with Naruto. He recalled Gaara, a homicidal, bloodthirsty madman who killed to establish his existence, evolve, and discover a way to live without bloodlust and learn to defend others. He recalled Princess Koyuki Kazuhana, who, after being inspired by Naruto, rose from being a total bitch to becoming the ruler of her people. Lastly, he considered the Godem Hokage and slug Sannin Tsunade, who, thanks to Naruto, had not only conquered her fear of blood, or hemophobia, but also her animosity toward Konoha due to her past, though she never expressed it aloud. The Sannin wanted to assist Naruto in becoming the next Hokage because she saw him as the son she never had. He was most enraged by that thought. Hokage. The village would be better off with Orochimaru as Hokage, Kakashi thought angrily. The worst thing for him was that there was nothing he could do to make the monster go away without someone discovering that he was responsible. But these weren't the only things he was thinking about. He considered Sasuke's health, questioning both his health and, more crucially, his sanity. Who knows what the boy's mental state had been affected by the curse mark in his battle with the Kyuubi. Who could have predicted what would happen to Sasuke when he was brought before the council? Just venture a guess. More significantly, who could predict Sasuke's future actions once he recovered? This loss would not be taken lightly by Sasuke. He would probably try to escape the village once more. Hardly anything he or the village could offer him in the way of strength or capability. The most potent weapon he had in battle was the curse seal. Which skill would Sasuke find more attractive or potent? There were none known to the Cyclops. No, that wasn't totally accurate. There was one thing that Kakashi was aware of that could outlast the curse seal. Sasuke might find one thing more alluring than anything Orochimaru could provide. Something that could only be obtained by an act of inhumanity. He thought to himself, the Mangekyo Sharingan. He and Sasuke both attested to the fact that the more powerful Sharingan was far more potent than the curse seal, and its powers were even more terrifying. In fact, if used properly, defeating any enemy would require the user to take no action at all. The Mangekyo needs to make eye contact in order to perform nearly all of its abilities. The most potent and terrifying genjutsu ever observed in the elemental nations was the Tsukuyomi. Once the victim looks directly into the user's eyes, it starts working, and the battle is effectively won. The victim is transported to a world of madness and nightmares where the user has complete control over time and reality. Days in this nightmare world are only 1 second long. The victim is tortured in this realm in horrifying ways of the user's choosing for what seems like days on end. Only another Mangekyo user can break this genjutsu. Everyone else is at the user's mercy. Another Mangekyo ability is the Amaterasu, which is a very agonizing way to pass away. The user briefly closes their eyes before rapidly opening them. The user's gaze instantly turns into black flames as soon as this occurs, supposedly hotter than the sun's surface. This black fire is the hottest material known to exist. Before going out, the fire burns for 7 days and nights. There are only 2 other options for putting out the flames: sealing them or using the Mangekyo. In contrast to Tsukuyomi, all the user needs to do is look in the adversary's general direction and, well, you know the rest. One Mangekyo skill that can be used for both attack and defense is Kamui. The enemy is drawn into a different dimension by the vortex created when the user's focus point collapses into itself. When it is activated, this can be used against adversaries as well as to intercept their attacks. Lastly, the Susanoo, the unstoppable warrior, is the final technique of the Mangekyo Sharingan that is known to exist. A flawless offense and defense are produced by this skill. When it is used, a large spirit composed entirely of energy is summoned. This entity acts as the user's guardian and is always unique based on who summoned it. It will use all of its strength to protect the user. Depending on how it looks, it can attack its opponent in different ways. In contrast, the user serves as a conduit for the spirit. This ability is the hardest for the Mangekyo to maintain and is uncommon even among Sharingan users. The user must serve as a conduit for the spirit, which requires all of the user's focus and life energy to sustain, resulting in excruciating pain. Naturally, this exposes the user to risk. Fortunately, the entity's energy is almost indestructible, and because it completely envelops the user, it is nearly impossible to attack them directly if the user wants it to. It can even repair itself with more life energy from them. The only options available to the adversary are to either sufficiently harm it or wait until the spirit vanishes due to the strain of its use. Indeed, anyone who learns it can use all of these skills. At best, the cost to achieve it is monstrous. At worst, it is utterly insane. The only known way to get it is to murder the person who is closest to them, whether that person be their parents, siblings, friends, or even a romantic partner. It activates because of the emotion brought on by the loss. Using the Mangekyo has a cost as well. If someone uses it frequently, they will eventually lose their sight and become blind. This is due to the fact that the advanced Sharingan's techniques demand so much chakra from the user's eyes that their condition worsens with each use. Madara, the founder of the Uchiha clan, is the only person who has ever managed to get around this, and it is currently unknown to the people of the Naruto universe how he accomplished it. Thus, those were Kakashi's primary concerns at the time: how to defeat the demon, and convince Sasuke to remain in Konoha while providing him with the strength he needs to achieve his objective so that he can honor his late teammate Obito. How? He pondered, how can I find a way to give Sasuke what he needs in order to, and exact revenge on Rin and Minato sensei? Then it dawned on him he had a method, a way to do both simultaneously, a strategy to kill Naruto and keep Sasuke in the village while leaving no one to properly blame. This is the only chance I'll ever get, so I need to work quickly, he thought eagerly. Nevertheless, he had to attend to Pakun right away. With a worried tone, he said, Pakun, you can leave now, I need to see to my students. Kakashi told the small dog. Pakun gave a nod before vanishing in a cloud of smoke. Good, Kakashi thought, now that there are no witnesses around. He channeled chakra into his arm, and it was soon charged with lightning. Now that I can start, he said. Then he hurried as quickly as he could. Naruto was about to lift Sasuke over his shoulder after tying him up when he heard a sound. It was a sound he was familiar with, one he would never forget since it was the result of an attack that had been used against him twice today. The chirping of a flock of birds. It was already too late when he turned to face the sound. The attacker's Chidori simply pressed firmly against Naruto's chest rather than penetrating through his body. Naruto screamed in agony as he felt electricity coursing through his body and then collapsed onto his back. He was immobilized. His arms and legs were immobile. He was vulnerable to his assailant. He raised his head and stared at the assailant, unable to believe what he saw. Astonished by the expression in the man's eyes, he exclaimed, Kakashi-sensei? Why? Why? Because it needs to be done and should have been done a long time ago. Kakashi replied to the blonde, Naru, no, the time has come to end this charade. Kyuubi. Addressing the student. I tried to keep an open mind all of these years. I tried to think of you in the way the Yondaime, my sensei, wished everyone to see you as, he went on, but I can no longer continue denying what you are. I cannot deny what you have done, and I will not deny of what you will do if you are allowed to live any longer. For the good of the village, you must die. After taking everything in with a great deal of shock, Naruto realized what he should have known all along. Uchiha? He inquired. I should have known. I should have seen the signs, the choosing of favorites, the lack of training, the fact that you taught Sasuke your prized technique. He grumbled. You wanted me dead just like those idiotic villagers. Do you only see me as a mere scapegoat to take your pain and anger out on? Chuckling. You're an even bigger fool than I expected, he concluded. Kakashi gave Naruto a side of the face kick. Shut up, monster. He shouted. You have no right to insult anyone in the village, let alone me, after what you did, after you took my teammate, Rin, and my sensei from me, and he growled. Naruto chuckled. He looked at the clouds as though he was deep in thought, saying, I wonder what they would say if they were here now. I don't know about your teammate, but I bet Dad wouldn't be too happy with your decision, he said. While cutting Sasuke's binds, Kakashi froze and turned to face Naruto in disbelief. He started to ask, how do you, but Naruto cut him off. His voice was irritated as he said, oh please, it really wasn't that difficult to decipher. He lifted his head and took in his traitorous sensei's shock and smirked before continuing, I figured that out all on my own, and when I confronted Ba-chan about it, she confirmed it. In fact, I was supposed to receive my inheritance a few days ago, but Teme over there, he said, nodding to Sasuke, decided to throw a fit and run off and take the easy path in order to gain the power he so craves. I've seen pictures of the man, for Christ's sake, and even Ero Sennin told me I looked just like him. Naruto laughed almost uncontrollably at the so-called prodigy's suffering in his own personal hell, saying, pitiful, isn't it? How his obsession with revenge continues to eat away at his sanity, and soon, so very soon, there will be nothing sane left going on inside his tiny little mind. Anyway, back to the topic at hand. I doubt my father would condone your actions, and Mom would probably castrate you where you stood. He sighed after finishing his laughter. That's right, I know about her too. He spat at the Cyclops, observing his surprise. I know that I acquired her taste in pranks and her short temper as well as my more sadistic nature, he continued, grinning. Kakashi gave his former pupil a startled and irate look. Don't compare yourself to them, he yelled. You are nothing like them and you never will be. He chuckled. You know as well as I do that what you just said isn't true. You know that I carry traits of both of my parents. You know that when you look at me, You see your deceased sensei and his wife, but most importantly, you know that your hate for me extends to my mother as well, because your ego made you think that the only family Dad ever needed was you," he said with all the poison that he had. Even more shocked than before was Kakashi seeing this. Naruto went on in a mockingly sympathetic tone. He asked, "Are you still crying over your father's death?" "Of course you are, what a weak little man you are," he said, laughing once more. "Shut up. You know nothing about my father," Kakashi spat, glaring at Naruto. Naruto smirked and said, "No, I don't suppose I do. But I do know what you call someone who lives in the past and ignores the present. Cowards, or fools if you prefer," he said, laughing. Naruto's chest was stomped on by Kakashi. "I said shut up," he snarled. While taking deep breaths and coughing from the pain, Naruto laughed and said, "Deny it all you want, it changes nothing. You cannot deny what you are, a pathetic little man who lives in the past because he can't handle the present or future," Naruto said. After giving Naruto another kick, Kakashi returned to Sasuke and completed his release. Then the Cyclopean produced a soldier's pill and forced him to swallow it. Sasuke awoke a few minutes later. "Where am I?" he inquired wearily. He instantly jumped up as memories rushed back into his head in a panic. He questioned, "Where's Naruto? What happened?" A voice that was familiar said, "You lost, simple as that." When Sasuke turned to face the voice's origin, he saw Naruto motionless and lying down. "Right, as if Adobe like you could defeat Uchiha elite like me," sneered Sasuke in a haughty manner. "Oh, but it's true, old friend, every word. My Rasengan sent you flying straight into the statue of your ancestor over there," as he pointed to the idol, "and if you still don't believe me, look at the mark your chest where my attack grinded into you." When Sasuke turned to face the statue, he saw that its leg did indeed have a crater in it. He noticed a circular burn on his chest that appeared to have been caused by grinding through the surrounding skin. "But how?" he muttered to himself. "You underestimated me, something you do quite often when it comes to fighting someone," said Naruto. "Sasuke," Kakashi said, "I gave a soldier pill to revive you and give you just enough chakra to use one more Chidori." Observing his sensei, Sasuke looked. "But why? So you can kill him," Kakashi interrupted, gesturing to Naruto, "and gain the power you need without having to leave the village. Orochimaru can't teach you how to use the Mangekyo," Kakashi added, raising his headband to reveal his own pinwheel-shaped Mangekyo to Sasuke. "But I can." Sasuke paused to reflect. The snake Sannin did not know how to use the more sophisticated Sharingan, as Kakashi had stated, since he is the last devoted Uchiha in the village. The council would probably forgive him if he went back to Konoha. In addition, he would avoid having to give Orochimaru his body. In this way Sasuke made the decision to concur with Kakashi. "Fine, I'll come back willingly, but you had better be serious about teaching me," he replied with a smile. With a nod, Kakashi pointed to Naruto. "You have my word now, kill this monster so we can go." Sasuke couldn't understand. He questioned, "Monster?" His voice was irritated as he said, "I'll explain everything later." With a nod, Sasuke approached Naruto and fixed him with his gaze. Naruto thought out loud, "So this is it. This is how I die at your pitiful hands." "Very much," Sasuke remarked, grinning malevolently. "Well, before I go, let me tell you something." Naruto's expression widened. "This decision will change nothing. You will never be able to kill Itachi. I know this, and I've only met the man once. He is more powerful than you could ever hope to be. The only thing you have ensured is that you are just like him." Naruto continued to laugh. With a growl, Sasuke kicked Naruto in the face. He growled, "Shut up. I am nothing like him." Naruto grinned and remarked, "Oh, but you are. You just haven't realized it yet." Rallying his Chidori, Sasuke yelled, "Time to die, loser." "So it would seem," Naruto said slowly but surely, "but mark my words, I will get out of this. If there is a way to cheat death, I will find it, and even if I can't escape, I will wait for you in hell. When you fail to kill your brother and die by his hands, you and Cyclops there can look forward to spending eternity in the deepest circle of hell, treachery, where traitors suffer alongside the devil himself. And when your torment begins, I will be there, laughing at your broken form, telling you, 'I told you so.' One way or another I'll be seeing you both very, very soon." Then he chuckled. Sasuke yelled, "Die!" and pressed his Chidori into Naruto's chest. After letting out a painful cry, Naruto coughed up a fountain of blood. Even though his heart was broken, he managed to look at Sasuke and Kakashi and say, "You will pay for this." He coughed up more blood and added, "You both will be sure of that." Then the light went out of his eyes. Sasuke felt an odd feeling in his eyes as he withdrew his arm from Naruto's chest. It felt uncomfortable, but it didn't burn exactly. The feeling ended abruptly. He saw his reflection. When he looked into the blood, his eyes were like ellipses that intersected. "You have awakened your Mangekyo," Kakashi said, glancing at Naruto's lifeless body. "Now we just have to bury this body," he stated after dragging Naruto's body close to the edge of the cliff. He took off the necklace Tsunade had given him and retreated. While performing multiple hand seals, he yelled, "Earth release. Rock lodging destruction." Naruto was essentially buried when a significant chunk of the cliffside collapsed on top of him. He said, "Now let's get going," but when he turned around, he saw that Sasuke had fainted from the chakra required to use the Chidori. He started the long run back to the village after hoisting Sasuke over his shoulder. The Cyclopean Jonin had no idea that this exchange was being observed by another person. A head gradually protruded from the trunk of a nearby tree. Its face was half black and half white. The head uttered two distinct thoughts. "This isn't good, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki is dead, and Leader Sama will be furious when he finds out." The head trembled at the idea, then sank back into the tree from which it had emerged. In the mindscape of Naruto, surrounded by an unending blackness, Naruto bobbed on his back. At first, everything was silent. Then a deep voice said something. Naruto recognized the voice of Kyuubi. The beast gazed at the straying child as Kyuubi's cage and seal materialized in the mindscape. In a bored tone, Kyuubi remarked, "So this is it? This is how we end, through betrayal, stabbed in the back by an idiot who cannot tell the difference between a kunai and the scroll that contains it. It looks like the villagers are going to get what they wanted all along in the end." He felt that this was inevitable. People are afraid of things they don't understand. Fear breeds hatred, which breeds rage, which breeds violence, which breeds, well, you get the idea. "No," was said in a voice that was nearly too quiet. Kyuubi turned to face Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, his vessel, the only possible source of the voice. Kyuubi questioned the boy. "What? No," he cried out again. "No, no, no, no." Before he struggled to stand and eventually managed to do so, he yelled, "It cannot end like this. It will not end this way. I will not die at the hands of idiots and fools. My life will not end at their hands. I won't give them the satisfaction." He still had a whole life to live and a lot of work to do. He had to keep his word, a dream he had yet to fulfill. He yearned to see the girl he loved once more. "It can't stop here," he thought. Kyuubi was taken aback by his host's rage and resolve. He said to the boy, "It's a bit late to decide that now, isn't it, Kit?" Naruto gave the beast a scowl. "Nothing is certain. There must be a way to escape this. There has to be." As he waited for the Biju to answer, he gazed into the fox's eyes. Kyuubi paused to reflect. Was it possible? As the strongest of the Biju, did he have an answer to that question? Death is inescapable. No one can escape it, not even I, he growled at the boy's tone. Nothing can save us short of. The fox suddenly recalled a way existed. There was no assurance that it would work, and it would hurt. However, if it did, Naruto interrupted the irritated Biju mid-sentence and asked, "Nothing short of what?" "I think I have a possible solution to our mutual problem," Kyuubi went on. "Go on. There is something I can do, but it will be difficult," Kyuubi admitted before continuing. "I carry the power to mutate living beings. I can change the being's genetic code so that they will become more powerful and be able to perform feats that are considered impossible by human, even demon standards." The phrase, "like returning from the dead," came to Naruto's attention. With a nod, Kyuubi said, "Among other things?" "Other things?" a bewildered Naruto asked. "Yes, what will change and what will remain is always different depending on the person or otherwise, because no two beings' genes are the same. In the past I charged others with eternal servitude in exchange for this, but, considering the circumstances, I will bestow this gift upon you for free." Though intrigued, Naruto needed a clear understanding of the fox's topic. He questioned, "You have used this on others?" Kyuubi replied, "Yes, centuries ago. I offered mortal beings this power in exchange for their loyalty." The blonde replied, "The effect was always different, but the result was always the same. The person became more powerful than before. I only had a dozen or so at any one time," he concluded. Bewildered, Naruto asked the Biju, "Where are these servants now?" Sighed, "This was before the sage of six paths passed his teachings on to others." He continued, "As the years passed, other mortals became aware of what I was doing and became consumed with fear. After learning how to control chakra, they rose up against me. Though my servants were stronger, they were heavily outnumbered and were defeated by the army's primordial shinobi, though not without losing most of their forces. Though they were exhausted and no match for me otherwise, I decided to retreat. I had been living in seclusion ever since. I haven't given anyone this kind of power since the day my servants were slaughtered," he said. Naruto pondered this for a while. Could a dozen creatures compete with whole armies? Indeed, this was a compelling offer. Something like this doesn't come free, and it certainly doesn't come without risks, he said. Kyuubi replied, yes, such a large mutation would require a great deal of my power to perform. I have no idea of what kind of effect it will have on you, the person I have been sealed into, and there is no guarantee that it will work. Even if it does work, it might not bring you back. Really? Tell me more, expressed Naruto's curiosity. At Konoha, after carrying Sasuke to the main gates of Konoha, Kakashi was met right away by a group of medic ninja along with a number of other shinobi and civilians, including one Sakura Haruno. When she saw the injured and unconscious Sasuke, said Kunoichi's expression of relief at seeing her sensei instantly turned to frantic worry. Sasuke-kun! She yelled as she ran to Kakashi, who gave Sasuke to the medical staff. Don't worry, Sakura, he's fine, just a little banged up, Kakashi assured his student with the pink hair. Sakura was relieved to hear these words right away, but she and Sasuke kept following the medic ninja to the hospital. With a sigh, Kakashi turned to face the recently arrived Anbu. He said to the Anbu, I need to speak to the Hokage, and they both nodded before leaving for the Hokage's office. The mindscape of Naruto was thinking about the repercussions after Kyuubi had just gone over the entire mutation process with him. He broke the momentary silence by saying, so let me get this straight, you take my DNA, twist it around like a kitten with a ball of yarn, and either I come out perfectly fine or utterly destroyed and become something inhuman. Either way? He asked. With a nod, Kyuubi said, that's the gist of it, yes. Naruto paused to reflect. Would it be worthwhile? What would he turn into? What would be different? What would not change? Would he remain himself, or would he change into someone or something else? Would he be liked by those who mattered to him? Like the other villagers, would they avoid him and be afraid of him? I can't delay our deaths much longer, Kyuubi said impatiently, urging everyone to hurry up and select Kit. After a further pause, Naruto questioned, will I still be human? Kyuubi responded, if it works, you'll be so much more, maybe even a god among men. After giving it some more thought, Naruto made a decision after considering the person he loved the most. It's worth the risk as long as I can see her again. What have I got to lose, anyway? He reflected to himself. All right, he said gravely, then he asked the Biju, what do I have to do, while gazing into his eyes. Kyuubi laughed, good, lie down on your back in front of my cage and I'll take care of the rest. Naruto looked up at Kyuubi. After doing so he sighed and said, I hope you're right about this. Kyuubi pondered, so do I, before adding, a word of warning Kid, this is going to hurt a lot. I can take it, was Naruto's emotionless response as he nodded. As a sizable pool of red chakra gradually poured out through the beast's cage's bars and encircled Naruto, Kyuubi remarked, I hope so. It begins. The screaming began as soon as the chakra started to seep into Naruto. The Hokage's office in Konoha. Tsunade sat at her desk and gazed at Kakashi, who had just arrived moments earlier, as well as the other Konoha 12 members, except for Sakura, who had refused to leave Sasuke's side, Shoji, Neji, Kiba, and Sasuke, who was in the hospital, whom Kakashi had also asked Tsunade to call to this meeting. When they realized Naruto was not present with them and had not been spotted bringing Kakashi to the front gates, everyone in the room, aside from Kakashi, who had an expression on their faces, displayed signs of concern. Tsunade was particularly concerned, as were her former teammate Jiraiya and her apprentice Shizune, who was holding Taunton. Kakashi, why have you called everyone here, and why isn't Naruto here? Tsunade responded. Kakashi pretended to be depressed as he said, I thought it would be best for everyone to be here when I deliver the news. As she silently prayed that her surrogate son was okay, the slug Sanin asked, her heart pounding painfully, what news? She, her teammate, her apprentice, and the other Konoha 12 members still feared the worst. After inhaling deeply, Kakashi said, Sasuke has been successfully retrieved, but, pausing to turn his head away from the Hokage. But what? She wanted to know. Sasuke, he entered a crazed frenzy because of the curse mark and ended up fighting Naruto, and by the time I arrived, he took another breath. Tsunade inquired, by the time you arrived what? Kakashi remained silent. What happened? Exclaimed Tsunade as she loudly slammed her fists down on her desk. Kakashi winced and took another deep breath before continuing. His voice broke just as he finished, by the time I arrived I was too late, sadly adding, Naruto is dead, I couldn't stop Sasuke in time. As everyone processed this startling news, it seemed as though the entire world stopped for a second. Tsunade exclaimed. No, Kakashi gave the blonde a sorrowful nod before pulling out the necklace she had given her and setting it on the desk in front of her. I'm afraid so, he replied. Sasuke killed Naruto before passing out from exhaustion. The battle weakened the cliffside and caused a landslide that buried him moments after Sasuke had used the Chidori. Pointing to the pendant, that was all I could recover. Jiraiya instantly produced the Toad summoning contract at these words as he opened it. He thought, there's only one way to know for sure. Red names were those of the people who were still alive among those who had signed it. The color black denoted death. Jiraiya glanced at the names and saw that Naruto's and the Yondaime's were black, while only his own was red. Jiraiya? Inquired Tsunade with a sorrowful tone. The Toad Sannin uttered, his name on the contract is black. He really is gone. They all glanced at Jiraiya's face after Kakashi's quarter-exposed face, searching frantically for any hint of dishonesty on either. Everyone in the room let the crushing pain take them when they couldn't find any. Lee started sobbing loudly and shamelessly right away, and Tenten tried and failed to control her own tears as she comforted him. Shikamaru averted his gaze from the others and hid his tears. He thought of the troublesome blonde, and silently criticized himself for bringing Naruto along on the mission and for failing to intervene to prevent Sasuke from killing the blonde. Although Shino showed no signs of emotion, he was suppressing an ocean of sorrow beneath his emotionless exterior. Hinata and, somewhat unexpectedly, Ino were the two who handled the news the worst. After a brief pause, Hinata gasped and fell, but Shino was there to catch her before she hit the ground, holding her as she sobbed. No, please don't, she begged herself in her head. To everyone's surprise, Ino had fallen to her knees, put her hands over her eyes, and started sobbing into them. Why am I crying so much? She asked herself. I don't understand. Why is it so painful? Why does it feel like someone tore out my heart? However, she was aware of the solution since Naruto had entered her family's flower shop 2 weeks prior to the Chunin exam finals. She had known in her heart. Rewind. Ino Yamanaka was reading a magazine and sighing as she sat at the front desk of her family's flower shop. For want of a better term, she was bored given that her parents had forced her to watch the store on her day off. She was also upset, and it didn't help at all that nobody had visited the store since it opened. Why did Mom and Dad have to have plans today? Ino sighed. This is the most boring day of my life, she exclaimed. Sighing once more after asking herself, great, my entire day has been wasted. The bell, which announced that someone had entered the store, rang at that precise moment. Her eyes widened in surprise as she looked up at the person who had just entered. In all his splendor, Naruto Uzumaki was standing there with a wilted potted plant in each hand. As he approached the counter, he thought to himself, I can't believe I'm doing this. He was worried that Konoha's second biggest gossip queen would cause a commotion and didn't particularly enjoy approaching her for assistance. Ino asked the question that had been weighing heavily on her mind for a few moments after she had recovered from her shock. She questioned bewilderedly, Naruto, what are you doing here and why are you carrying that? The plant was set on the counter by Naruto. He remarked, I think this one needs help. Ino gazed at him. She said, this one? You mean you have more? Yeah, so, he replied. She was irritated by his response and asked, so, since when do you garden? As usual, he replied simply, now, can you help or not? He asked, irritated. After rolling her eyes, Ino took a closer look at the potted plant. She concluded by glancing at him as if it were clear that you watered it too much and too often, and that the soil is too moist. God damn it all to hell. I should have known. I'm always worried about underwatering while on missions, he yelled. Pardon my language, he quickly corrected, clearing his throat as he glanced up at Ino's startled face. Forget it, I have some special fertilizer in the back that could help, Ino said with a smile and a roll of her eyes. He returned the smile and said, lead the way. Following her into the rear of the store, Naruto observed her browsing the shelves. So how's Sasuke-kun? Ino broke the silence when Ino turned and swung at him for that final remark. Naruto rolled his eyes and responded, still arrogant, still wallowing in self-pity, and still being an idiot as always. He then leapt back. She yelled, Sasuke-kun isn't an idiot. Naruto laughed. Yes he is. All you have to do is look at him from a non-fangirl point of view. Naruto chuckled at Ino's sulky face as she growled, you're so cute when you're angry. Ino looked down at her feet, blushing as these words lifted her from her angry glare. Are really? She inquired unsurely. Yes, he replied with a smile, very cute. With a deeper flush, Ino returned to browsing the shelves. As she reached for the upper shelves, Naruto observed her arching her back. He caught himself staring at her and thought, damn, she's gorgeous. Wait, what the fuck did I just think? He was staring at her when Ino looked over her shoulder and saw his face. She chose to retort him with a smile. She put her index finger on her lip, batted her eyelashes at him, and swayed her hips slightly before asking in the most innocent voice she could manage, "And just what are you staring at?" And nothing. It's just that you're so beautiful," he spluttered, blushing, and then mentally chastised himself for uttering such a statement. Hinata would have been embarrassed by the intensity of Ino's blush. She stammered a little as she asked, "Do you really think so?" He replied, Yeah, I do. I really do." Ino grinned. Naruto had just brightened her day, and she felt like she was on top of the world for some reason. They were both surprised by what she did next. She approached him, gave him a cheek kiss, and said, "Thank you." Before her thoughts overcame her behavior, both of them flushed, and Ino muttered an apology before re-examining the shelves. She reflected, "Now that I think about it, he is pretty cute." Wait, did I just think that? She asked herself. Following several awkward silences, Naruto asked Ino a question he had always had about Sakura and Ino. "Ino?" he inquired. "Yes, Naruto?" she asked, continuing to browse the shelves. "Why do you fawn over Sasuke?" he asked after taking a deep breath. Ino went cold. She asked herself the same question for the first time in her life. She had no idea how to respond to that. Because he's talented and he's hot. Sakura and the other Sasuke fangirls would have responded with that straightforward but superficial response. Ino, however, thought it was too pitiful and superficial. She started crying when she recognized that she was the same way. She believed that she stood out from the others. Naruto was startled to see tears in her eyes and asked, "Ino?" Placing his hands on her shoulders, he moved forward. "Ino, what's wrong? Why are you crying?" With tears streaming down her cheeks, Ino gazed at him. "I don't know," she replied. "I don't know why I like Sasuke. I've never asked myself that before," she went on. "I think it's because he's cute and talented, but that seems so shallow." She choked up and said, "I used to think I was unique and special, different than the other girls but the truth is, I'm no different than they are. I'm just as pathetic and shallow as there," she concluded. Naruto was horrified and felt bad for approaching her. He couldn't bear to see this angelic being in such agony in front of him, and he looked into her tear-filled eyes. He shut the distance and put his arms around her without hesitation. "I'm sorry for asking. It's okay. Don't cry. Please don't cry," he crooned, whispering to her, "Shush, Ino, shush." Shocked, Ino gave him a hug in return. "I just hate knowing how pitiful and weak I really am," she stammered. "I'm sorry." Naruto yelled, "Stop it," with a growl. After giving him a quick glance, Ino turned away and started crying even harder. "He thinks I'm pathetic too," she thought sorrowfully. Naruto forced her to look at him by grabbing her chin between his thumb and index finger. "You listen to me," he said with seriousness. "You are not weak, you are not pathetic, and you are not like the other girls. You are a kind, caring, beautiful young woman who deserves love and happiness. You are above those other girls. They are blind fanatics who are too stupid to realize their own useless idiocy," he screamed. Ino looked at him in disbelief and reminded him, But I'm one of those G-girls." Naruto gave a headshake. He clarified, "You were one, but only because you were caught in this fad. But you are not the problem," he added, but he's too wrapped up in his own self-pity to realize that almost every girl he meets wants him, even a goddess like yourself." Naruto took a deep breath before continuing. "You wonder why I call him an idiot? That's why." When he spoke, Ino was both shocked and moved with hesitation. She said, "G-goddess? Me?" He nodded and grinned, concluding firmly, "Yes, Ino. You are more beautiful than all the flowers inside and outside of this store combined. I just never noticed it until now." Ino had never in her life felt so content and valued. She was unable to control herself any longer. She closed her eyes, put her arms around his neck, and gave him a passionate kiss that was so strong she could knock them both to the ground, her on top of him. After a moment of shock, Naruto's eyes widened before he closed them and gave her an equally passionate kiss in return. Their tongues soon joined the battle as they fought for supremacy over one another as their lips moved and ground against one another. "She tastes fantastic," he pondered as he tasted something that tasted almost floral on her tongue. "He has a flavor similar to miso ramen." She thought, "Not bad." Then she kissed him more deeply. For well over half an hour, they made out passionately on the floor before grudgingly splitting up. Both of them gasped for air and blushed after staring at each other blankly. "I'm sorry," Ino said with a smile. Naruto told her, "Don't be." Then Ino saw a tiny package next to them and realized it was the fertilizer she had been looking for. She blushed and said, "Found it? Laughing, Naruto said, so you have. After getting up and cleaning themselves up, the two made their way back to the reception desk. Naruto said, so, what do I owe you? After giggling, Ino drew him in for another intense kiss, which lasted for roughly 5 minutes before they parted ways. That'll do. She smiled and said. Naruto questioned, are you sure? Definitely, she replied with a smile, especially since you gave me the perfect first kiss and helped me feel better. Well, in that case, said Naruto with a sly smile, keep the change. Oh, I will, Naruto-kun, she said, smiling and licking her lips sensuously. Naruto picked up the fertilizer bag and plant. With hope, he said, Ino-chan, do you want to go out with me sometime? Well, I'll have to think about it. Okay. Ino smiled and made a face as though she was deep in thought. How about this Friday at 8? She offered. Naruto grinned and said, sounds good, see you then, Angel. Ino gave him a farewell kiss as he walked away, blushing at the moniker he had given her. Despite himself, Naruto had a very silly smile on his face as he walked down the street with a fresh bounce in his step. He thought to himself, I feel like my life is going to get a lot better from here on out. Suddenly, a voice outside of his head, not Kyuubi, asked, what about Sakura-chan? Who? He smiled even wider as he reflected. Meanwhile, Ino sat at the counter and started to daydream. Angel? Me? I take it back, she thought. Pausing before continuing, it's not the dullest day of my life, she cheered to herself, thinking, it's the best day of my life. She heard someone ask, what about Sasuke-kun? In the back of her mind. Who? She smiled as she reflected. When her parents returned an hour later, they saw how incredibly happy she was. She just shrugged when they asked her what was making her so happy, responding, it's a nice day. End of flashback. I loved him, Ino reflected. Even though we didn't spend much time together, I still loved him, and now I'll never get a chance to tell him. She wept. Naruto, I'm so sorry, and her tears got more intense. Everyone was taken aback by Ino's response. Neither Ino nor Naruto had bothered to disclose their romantic relationship, not because they were embarrassed, but simply because it had never been brought up. The time wasn't right, so the others didn't bother to ask her. Kakashi was taken aback by everyone's responses and briefly experienced guilt. The word, brief, is crucial. He reasoned that he must still be in charge of them and hoped that things would eventually get back to normal. After a short while, Tsunade picked up the necklace, rose from her seat, and turned to face the window, keeping her face hidden from view. Her voice trembled a little as she said, I see, is that all? She asked. Yes, Kakashi replied. Hokage-sama, she said, then you are all dismissed. There was a brief period of silence after everyone had left, with Shino assisting Hinata and Shikamaru assisting Ino. Tsunade Heim, Jiraiya said, coming up to her, are you? Tsunade threw herself at him and embraced him, sobbing into his chest before he could finish. She was so depressed that the genjutsu that had been used to conceal her actual age vanished, exposing an elderly woman who appeared so fragile that she would shatter at the first sign of contact, a startling sight given her renowned strength. Despite his shock, Jiraiya put his arms around her and silently allowed the tears that had been building inside of him to fall. Shizune started crying as well, hardly able to hold on to Tonton unexpectedly. The young pig was also in tears, with tiny drops streaming down her cheeks. The four of them stood in the office lamenting the passing of Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who had permanently altered their lives. A few hours later, in the Valley of the End, with the exception of the distant thunder and rain, the valley where two battles took place, one between Naruto Uzumaki and Sasuke Uchiha and the other between the Shoden Hokage, Hashirama Senju, and Madara Uchiha, was quiet. Additionally silent was the heap of debris that had served as the late Nine-Tails Jinchuriki's grave. But from the makeshift tomb came a low rumbling sound. The rocks and debris started to tremble as the rumbling gradually got louder. Then a source of tremendous strength blasted the debris away with a monstrous roar. It was replaced by a lone figure when the dust settled. This figure was dressed in a large trench coat, fingerless gloves, long pants, a shirt, and typical ninja footwear. The Uzumaki clan's red emblem, which appeared to have 9 red tails extending from it, was displayed on the back of the trench coat. The figure had 3 whisker-shaped birthmarks on each cheek and spiky blonde hair. Naruto Uzumaki had come back from the afterlife, accomplishing the unthinkable. Yes. The beast exclaimed excitedly inside the boy's head, the transformation is a success, Kyuubi thought. Naruto approached the water and gazed at his own image. He had a nice appearance. He was taller and more muscular than before, but otherwise he looked almost the same. He had longer, more spiky hair, his whisker marks were deeper, and all of his baby fat was gone. He was relieved by his appearance, but then he noticed and felt his skin change, with odd dark red and black flecks showing where the shifting had taken place and then swiftly going away, but even though it had happened quickly, it had felt awkward. He told himself, "I look like shit." Kyuubi asked, "How do you feel?" with a laugh. After examining his body, Naruto looked up and grinned menacingly as he spoke one word aloud. "Fantastic." Konoha. Office of the Hokages. A year later. Tsunade Senju, the Godem Hokage, was seated at her desk, battling a foe that even the most powerful cages dread. Paperwork. Tsunade let out a deep breath. The past year had been filled with grief for nearly everyone in Konoha and a ton of paperwork for her. She reflected on how Naruto's death had been received by everyone. The Uchiha was hailed as a hero by the villagers, who were largely celebrating the demon's death. Tsunade made those taking part in the celebrations spend time with Ibiki Morino in the Anbu interrogation center after Anko Midarashi, who had grown sympathetic to Naruto's position as an outcast like herself, detonated several explosive tags within each group. It goes without saying that quickly silenced them all. Speaking of Anko, Iruka Amino had noticed her behavior and was pleased that someone was preventing the shinobi and civilians from harming his favorite student and younger brother figure after Naruto's death. The two had gotten along well, despite Anko's insane, bloodthirsty personality initially frightening him. However, Naruto's passing deeply saddened a few civilians. Tuchi and Ayame Ichiraku were among them. Naruto was always their favorite customer, and Ayame thought of him as the little brother she never had, so the father-daughter duo loved him very much. They wouldn't serve anyone who applauded Sasuke or who was pleased with the blonde's passing at one point. This led to a dispute between the two, and some inebriated villagers' ramen had been ordered in honor of the hero who killed the Kyuubi by the group's leader. In response, Ayame threw a boiling pot of water on the drunk's head and continued beating him with the pot repeatedly until he was admitted to the hospital for severe burns and a concussion, among other injuries. Ayame threw kitchen knives at the next group that attempted to argue, and they were stabbed and ended up in the hospital. Those who had told everyone to use caution when speaking around the psycho bitch were the only ones who continued to bother the two. They developed a new variety of ramen and introduced it to the menu as the Naruto Uzumaki Deluxe Ramen Special, in an effort to show their gratitude to their favorite patron and to sneer at the other villagers. The Sandame's law of secrecy was also repealed as a result of Naruto's death, and soon after, the entire village's younger generation was aware that Naruto was a Kyuubi, and many of them wanted to turn against the now-deceased boy. This was a huge failure. The Konoha 12, now 11, had mostly remained loyal to Naruto and had grown to respect the blonde on a whole new level. Shoji was unconscious in the hospital at the time, so he didn't hear the news right away until Shikamaru told him when he woke up, but after learning of his friend's passing, he started crying. The heir of the Akamichi clan refused to eat anything upon his release, much to the surprise of his teammates and sensei, claiming that it would be a fitting memorial to the passing of the only person who had ever defeated him in a ramen eating competition. Despite his mother's opinion of the young blonde, Kiba had also been devastated by the news he and Akamaru would beat the living daylights out of anyone he saw celebrating, including his fellow clan members, after he was discharged from the hospital and learned about the festivities. In spite of the villagers' hatred, Lee had adopted his sensei's opinion that Naruto's upbeat demeanor had made his flames of youth burn even brighter than his own, and he vowed to one day attain Naruto's level of youthfulness. Neji actually broke down in tears upon hearing Tenten's news, regardless of his pride. Neji and Hinata had pledged to uphold Naruto's memory by figuring out how to complete the task Naruto had begun and obtaining the Hyuga clan to forbid the use of the caged bird seal on the clan's branch members. He had Tenten to help him along with Hinata over the course of the previous year. The two teammates became very close and ultimately fell in love. This was both a blessing and a curse, as Guy and Lee were obviously moved to tears upon learning of it and praised the two lovers' youthfulness. Speaking of Hinata, Naruto's passing had devastated the bashful Hyuga heiress. Her anxious father had sent guards to keep an eye on her from a distance for the first 6 months because he was afraid she would attempt suicide. Hinata eventually began to recover from her depression with the support of her father, her cousin Neji, her teammates Kiba and Shino, her sensei Kurenai, and her younger sister Hanabi. She started training with Neji and her father because she had vowed to work harder than ever to become as strong as her late crush. Ino was the one who, along with Hinata, took Naruto's death the hardest. For weeks, she wouldn't leave her room. She only left to eat or to visit Naruto's grave, where she brought flowers every day. It was a straightforward graveyard. It was only a simple memorial because Naruto's body was never found in the Valley of the End, so there was no body to be buried. It said, Naruto Uzumaki, the friend and hero who changed countless lives for the better. It was the target of numerous instances of defacing. Shortly after it was created, many of Naruto's friends would beat those who did so into a near coma when this occurred. Ino and Hinata, or both, would administer a slow, agonizing beating if they saw someone damaging it. The two girls once beat a villager who chose to urinate on the memorial into what the hospital staff called a unrecognizable bloody stain. Before waiting for him to wake up so they could repeat the act, they were too scared to be stopped by the nurses and doctors. Hinata's gentile fist strikes caused the offending villager to suffer severe internal bleeding and break almost every bone in his body. Any shinobi who were discovered damaging the memorial had to face a furious Tsunade Senju. She demoted a number of Chunin, Jonin, and even a few Anbu to Genin level after the memorial was put up. Some of them were even returned to the academy by her. Anyone who attempted to defend their actions was either imprisoned or, in some extreme cases, put to death for their trouble despite protests from the council, primarily the elder and civilian branches. The Slug Sanin had firmly imposed her will on the matter, causing the entire building to tremble and the floor to shatter. Fortunately, a sizable portion of the village's ninja were intelligent, harbored no animosity toward Naruto, and, if they did, kept it to themselves. There was really no way for anyone to get away with it because Kiba and Akamaru would follow the persons or people's scent across town if the person who vandalized the grave was, for whatever reason, nowhere near the scene at the time. Returning to Ino, she had also taken a leave of absence from her job at her family's store for a while because it was there that the two blondes fell in love. Everyone, her friends, anyway, had heard about her relationship with Naruto since his death and, despite their shock, felt sorry for her. The news that her daughter was dating the Kyuubi brat infuriated her parents, who blamed the brat for her brother's death during the Kyuubi attack. Her father, Inoichi Yamanaka, was happy to see her stop being so smitten with Sasuke and gave his full approval. Thinking she was still under the monster's control, the woman had attempted to introduce her daughter to other boys, all of whom were admirers, in the hopes that this would resolve the issue. After politely declining each of them, Ino's attitude appeared to deteriorate. Ino's mother had constantly tried to influence her daughter until roughly 4 months after Naruto's death, when Ino finally lost it, despite her husband's advice to ignore the matter. Rewind: the Yamanaka family had just finished dinner when Ino came downstairs, her eyes red with tears and her head hung low. Ino's parents tried to get her to open up to them while they were eating, but it took little work at last. Masami let out a sigh and made the decision to confront the issue head on and end it. She started by saying, "Listen Ino, I know you like that boy, but sometimes you have to move on. Please, for the love of God, do not do this. And, are you batshit crazy?" were the two things that came out of her husband Inoichi's incredulous gaze as she ignored him. For a brief moment, Ino gazed up at her mother with sorrowful eyes before turning back to her plate. "It's not that simple," she said. "I don't think this is something I can ever get over. Not matter how hard I try, I don't think I'm built to deal with this kind of loss." Unaware of the emotional minefield she was entering, Masami asked, "Why not?" Inoichi gestured for her to stop, but she disregarded him once more. "Speaking of which, my friend Satomi told me that her son was interested in you today, and I thought that," she added, "there are plenty of other men in the village, better ones too." "No, thank you," Ino cut in. That was the tipping point. Masami shocked her husband and daughter by slamming her hands onto the table. She yelled, "I'm sick of this, Ino. What will it take for you to realize that you're better off without him?" Inoichi made an effort to soothe his wife. "Dear, don't. No Inoichi," she said, "she needs to hear this." She went on, "Why can't you just accept the fact that he's nothing but a monster, the same monster that killed my brother and your uncle?" She yelled. "Yet you still defend him and cry over him. I never would have approved of you dating him anyway if I had known. The best thing for you to do is accept what he was and move on to other." She stepped on a mine at that point, which triggered a series of events. She yelled, "Shut up," Ino interrupted. "Mom." This surprised both of Ino's parents. This was the first time Ino had ever screamed at her mother. "What do you know about him?" Ino went on, yelling, "What makes you think you know anything about him? He wasn't a monster, he only hurt people to protect others. He always thought of others first and would do anything to make someone he cared about happy. Oh, and by the way, when we were together he always treated me like royalty, like a princess, and he never asked anything of me." She said, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Now get this through your head. I loved him. I loved him with all of my heart and I always will. My only regret was never being able to tell him. You have no idea what his life was like, so keep your mouth shut about things you don't understand," she concluded, running upstairs to her room in tears, leaving her shocked parents behind. Inoichi whispered to his wife, I warned you, before going upstairs to try to comfort his daughter. End of flashback. Masami came to her realization and was genuinely ashamed of everything she had ever said or thought about Naruto after speaking with her husband and doing a lot of introspection after a long time. She eventually made amends with Ino after apologizing to her daughter and owning up to her mistakes. Despite Hinata's initial intense jealousy of Ino for being with Naruto the way she had dreamed about being with him, the two had become close friends over the course of the previous year. They went to Naruto's apartment and took everything valuable to conceal in remembrance of him. These included his trophies from his previous adventures, such as the headband Mizuki had requested from the Hokage after he beat the silver-haired traitor into an unrecognizable pulp. Naruto had also slashed through the headband. A piece of Haku's mask, a written note from Ibiki congratulating him on passing the first exam without answering any questions. The empty container that had once held a healing ointment that Hinata had given him after defeating Kiba. Hinata fainted upon discovering this. A vial of sand that Naruto had gathered some time after his battle with Gaara. A photo of himself standing with Tsunade, Shizune holding Taunton, and Jiraiya that had been taken on the way back from finding the Slug Sannin and pursued her to return with them. And finally, an autographed picture of Princess Koyuki Kazuhana. Ino discovered a picture of herself and Naruto sitting against a tree with Naruto's arms around her and her in his lap, taken by one of Naruto's shadow clones. While she was going through the apartment, they were both grinning. One of the happiest days of Ino's life was the day this was taken, she recalled. Additionally, he revealed his greatest secret to her on that day. Rewind. On a lovely Saturday afternoon, Naruto had set up a picnic in an open field on the outskirts of the village for himself and his cherished girlfriend, Ino. Naruto had sealed what remained into a scroll. After they were done, the two then made the decision to take a nap beneath a nearby tree for shade. With her head resting on his chest and his arms encircling her waist, Ino sat in her boyfriend's lap. Following a brief period of silence, Naruto turned to face her and grinned. He said, "Comfy, Ino-chan?" Ino grinned up at him and replied, "Yep." Since he last saw her, Naruto noticed that her hair had grown a little longer. She no longer wore it in the bun that she had been wearing since the conclusion of the Chunin exam preliminaries. He said, "Your hair is longer." "Yeah, I liked it better when it was longer," Ino said, nodding. "Naruto-kun?" She started, but hesitated unsurely. "Something wrong?" Naruto inquired after noticing her hesitancy. "Well, I was wondering, do you like my hair longer or shorter?" she said after pausing. "You're worried about what I would think?" said Naruto, laughing. "Well, yeah, I mean we are dating and all, and I want to look my best for you," Ino said with a sheepish nod. She quickly melted into the passionate kiss he interrupted her with. Naruto went on, "How do you like your hair?" after they parted. After giving it some thought, Ino concluded, "I thought it made me look prettier longer, like it used to be." "Then I like it that way too. Besides, that ponytail made you look sexy as hell," he said with a smile as he kissed her again. "Really?" she asked, flushed. "Yes," Naruto told her, nodding. Before moving her lips to his ear, Ino drew herself closer to him and planted a kiss on him. She whispered sensuously, "Then you should see it when I let it down, it's much sexier." With a shudder, Naruto questioned, "Really? Trust me, you won't be disappointed," she said with a giggle, and Ino nibbled at his ear. After a few more shivers, Naruto pulled her face to his and gave her a passionate kiss. Ino groaned with delight. After about 10 minutes, they parted ways, and Ino gazed at him. You're more eager today, aren't you?" She licked her lips and smiled at him. Naruto chuckled and said, "How can I not be? I am holding an angel after all, and it doesn't help that she's such a tease." With a flush, Ino pulled himself closer to his chest. Ino eventually made the decision to speak up. She inquired inquisitively, "So, are you going to tell me what happened when you went to find Tsunade-sama?" Naruto started talking about his search for the legendary sucker, Suande Senju, after he had finished laughing when he told Ino about his experience with the Akatsuki. They encountered a problem early on in the narrative. The Bingo book recently introduced the organization to the general public, only that it was an organization of S-ranked missing nins wearing black cloaks with red clouds on them was mentioned. She frantically examined him, looking for any wounds, and asked, "What happened? Were you okay? Did they hurt you?" He soothed her back and said, "Ino-chan, please calm down." Itachi swatted Sasuke around before Ero Sennin drove them away before they could harm me. Since Tsunade was the only one who could heal Sasuke, Ino felt bad for him because he was seriously injured. She questioned, "Itachi, he's Sasuke's brother, right?" Naruto replied, "Yeah, Itachi Uchiha is the only other Uchiha clan member still alive," and went on, 7 years ago, He wiped out his entire clan single-handedly in one night, and Sasuke's wanted revenge ever since then. Is he really that powerful? Ino asked in astonishment. I would seem so, Naruto replied. He caught Sasuke's Chidori with one hand and easily defeated Kakashi-sensei. He shook his head, saying, it wasn't even a fight. But that attack broke through Gaara's sand shield during the Chunin exams. Ino exclaimed, her shock intensifying even further. Naruto replied, I know, there's something about him. The man's eyes were so intimidating, no amount of regret in them at all. He continued. He used some sort of genjutsu on Sasuke just by looking into his eyes. The screaming was terrible. Ino saw a lot of sadness in her boyfriend's eyes when she looked into them with a tight embrace. She said, I'm so sorry. With a sigh, he gave her a hug in return and said, it's okay, it's not your fault. What happened next? Ino asked after pausing. Naruto went on. Ero Sennin showed up and Itachi and his partner took off. Ero Sennin used a jutsu called Toad Mouth Bind, and it summoned a giant toad esophagus that covered the entire hallway. He exhaled. He said the trap was inescapable, but Itachi burned through it using some sort of black fire. We had to seal the flames, and when we opened the scroll, when we checked back 5 days later, they were still burning. It took 1 week before they extinguished, he concluded. Could fire burn that long without extinguishing? Ino's eyes widened. She recalled her boyfriend saying that Itachi had a partner, and she thought, but then again, it was able to break them free. Naruto-kun? Replied she, you said there were 2 of them? Yeah, the other guy's name was Kisame Hoshigaki, he replied, nodding. Ino said, that name sounds familiar. After recalling hearing it in history class after searching her memory, I remember hearing that name in class when Iruka-sensei told us about the village hidden in the mist. Choosing to give in to her, Naruto explained that, he's one of the 7 swordsmen of the mist. The swordsman? That tried to kill the Mizukage? Ino exclaimed quickly. Yeah, just like Zabuza Momochi, Naruto told her. Nodding. Ino was already aware of what had happened in Wave Country during Team 7's C rank turned a rank mission. Only I believe Kisame is stronger, Naruto concluded. Even the mere thought frightened Ino. Naruto went on. He looked like a shark and carried a huge sword on his back that fed on chakra. Sadistic bastard wanted to cut my legs off so they could carry me away easier. Stop. Please stop. I don't want to hear anymore, Ino interrupted, her eyes brimming with tears. She was terrified of what had happened to her beloved boyfriend. Ino-chan, I'm sorry, please don't cry, it's okay, everything's alright, I won't let them hurt you, Naruto said calmly as he rocked her back and forth, realizing that he had scared her and holding on tightly. Ino gave him a startled look. Was he concerned about her? Was her safety a concern for him? I'm not worried about me, I'm worried about you, she said. I don't know what I'd do if something happened to you. Naruto forced her to look at him by resting his thumb and index finger on her chin. Nothing will happen to me, he promised. I'll always be here, I'll never leave you. Then he gave her the most passionate kiss he could manage. She gave a happy, pleasurable groan in response, then tackled him, pinning him to the ground on his back. As she lay on top of him, they separated and sat up again after more than 30 minutes. You said they came for you? Ino recalled. Why are they after you? She asked anxiously, and he nodded. Tensing, Naruto replied. I can't tell you, don't you trust me? She pouted. Why not? No, it's not that, it's just difficult to explain. I don't want you to think any less of me, he said, shaking his head at the end. Think less of you? I don't understand, I could never think badly of you, she said, perplexed, to Ino. Naruto remained silent with the cutest face she could manage. Ino looked him in the eyes and said, Please? In a babyish voice. Please, Naruto-kun? Naruto made an effort to resist, but the cuteness got the better of him. All right, he exclaimed, laughing, before he sighed and adopted a serious expression. But once you hear the story, you might not want to be around me anymore, he explained. Ino-chan, do you know what event took place on October 10th almost 13 years ago? He asked after taking a deep breath. The village was attacked by the Kyuubi no Kitsune, she said, nodding. Do you know what happened to it? Asked Naruto, nodding. Yes, she replied, the Yondaime Hokage killed the beast at the cost of his own life. Shaking his head and letting out a sigh, Naruto said, No, that's just the lie the adults made up. What do you mean? Ino asked, perplexed. The Kyuubi, like the rest of the Biju, is made entirely out of chakra that takes a solid shape and form, and chakra can't die. Naruto sighed once more. The Yondaime couldn't slay the Kyuubi, no one can, but it can be sealed, he said, turning to face Ino. He sealed it? Where? She inquired, unsure of how he would be aware of everything. Not where, what, or who, he added, shaking his head. Ino was startled and continued, he had to seal it away into a person, but not just any person, he continued. Any human being with developed chakra coils would be destroyed instantly by the process and the Kyuubi would have been released once more. She responded, so he sealed it into someone whose chakra coils hadn't fully developed, a newborn child, an orphan, someone who was born the day of the attack. He turned to her and concluded, I was the only child born on October 10th that year. He sealed the Kyuubi into you? Ino asked, her eyes widening as she realized what he was trying to convey. Chakra flowed through his body as he raised his shirt. Ino gasped when the seal finally materialized on his stomach. Yes, he sealed the beast into me, his newborn son, Naruto concluded with a sigh and a nod. With his eyes widening even more, Ino said, his son? But how can you be? His wife and child died during the attack. He nodded. You shouldn't believe everything the council says. 50% of what they say is a lie and 49% is propaganda. The 1% left over is the only actually truth. How do you know? Ino asked after mentally grinning at the statistics he had provided. Shrugged. I had suspicions. I've seen pictures of him before and I heard people whispering that we look exactly alike, except for the whisker marks. When he touched his face, these are just another side effect of the Kyuubi. I also grew suspicious when Jiraiya taught me the Rasengan, which was one of Dad's signature jutsus. He breathed deeply. I mean, who else would he have sealed the fox into? He wouldn't do it to someone else's child, would he? He inquired before going on. When I confronted Ero Sennin and Ba-chan about it and pointed out the overwhelmingly obvious evidence, they confirmed it after I pressured them a bit, he concluded. Ino was shocked, but she also noticed a similarity between the two, and she understood why her mother detested Naruto so much and why he had arrived at class the day after the Kyuubi festival covered in cuts and bruises, if not more. Sighing, now I suppose you'll run away from me like everyone else. He grumbled, I understand. Everyone thinks because the Kyuubi is sealed within me it makes me the monster itself. He growled and went on. All my father wanted as his dying wish was for his son to be treated as a hero by the villagers, but instead they spit on his grave and attack me every chance they can get, and it's always worse on my birthday. If it weren't for the enhanced healing capacity the beast grants me I would have died a long time ago. He trailed off sorrowfully. When Ino noticed the expression in his eyes, he sat up. Naruto thought she was leaving him when he felt her get up. His heart broke, until he witnessed what transpired next. Remembering how she used to tease him at the academy, Ino threw her arms around him and gave him a tight hug while sobbing for all the pain he had to go through. I'm so sorry, she said repeatedly. Initially taken aback, Naruto gave her a hug in return. They separated after a few more seconds. Ino made a fake angry face and looked her beloved in the eyes. She referred to him as Naruto Uzumaki, in the manner of a reprimanding parent. Did you really think this would scare me away from you? She asked sternly. What? Naruto asked, doing a double take. You heard me, she replied. Did you really think I was going to leave you just because you have the Kyuubi sealed inside of you? Do you really think I'm that shallow? He responded. Naruto was taken aback. This type of response was unexpected. Ino-chan. Shish, Ino said, placing her finger over his lips. I don't think you're a monster, she added, pausing. I know you aren't the Kyuubi. I know you didn't really kill any of those people, but most importantly. Naruto was dying of anticipation. She saw his face, laughed, and went on. Most importantly, I know who you really are. You are the kind, caring, and loving guy who made me feel like I was worth something, like I was special. You are the guy who saved me from life as a shallow fangirl and then swept me off my feet. You're my boyfriend. The best boyfriend any girl could ever ask for. I could never think badly of you no matter what my mother or any of the other villagers say. I know I'm right, she said, beaming with pride. As he grinned at her, Naruto was filled with relief and amazement, tears streaming down his cheeks. Then, with more passion than ever, he drew her into a kiss with a sigh. Ino melted into the kiss and let out a loud groan of pleasure. Their separation came nearly an hour later. They exchanged glances and grinned. As the first to speak, Naruto said, Thank you, Ino-chan, thank you for accepting me. It'll take more than a demon sealed inside you to keep me away, Ino said with a laugh and a wink at him. Naruto drew his angel into his lap and held her against his chest after they had both finished laughing. He smiled and said, Now then, do you want to know what happened next on our journey to find Ba-chan? Ino nodded and returned the smile. Naruto went on to describe how he was taught the Rasengan and how they had located Tsunade, the ancient bat, and attempted to convince her to become the Godem Hokage. He told her about his encounter with Orochimaru and Kabuto Yakushi, as well as the bet he had won with her. Ino was taken aback to discover that Orochimaru's right-hand man was the four-eyed genin who had failed the Chunin exams 7 times, including that year's exam. Kabuto? The same Kabuto that helped us during the Chunin exams? She inquired. Naruto nodded. That's the one, and sighed. I knew there was something about that geek that was off. He had Jonin-level chakra reserves and yet he still failed 7 times. He fought Ba-chan to a draw until he used her fear of blood against her. Then I tried to save her and he beat the hell out of me. He noticed that Ino was becoming concerned and replied, but I was able to defeat him with a Rasengan. He healed himself, but the shock from the blow still brought him down. Ino felt a sense of relief, then something came back to her. Why was Orochimaru looking for Tsunade-sama? She inquired. It turns out he needed her help, Naruto said with a sly smile, because the fight with the old man had hurt his arms pretty badly. You said Kabuto was a medical nin, right? Why didn't he heal Orochimaru? The perplexed Ino questioned. Grimaced. This was no ordinary wound. Ero Sennin told me he used a sealing jutsu that summoned the Shinigami himself to rip Orochimaru's soul right out of his body at the cost of the summoner's life. The same jutsu that imprisoned the Kyuubi within me. The Shinigami removes the soul of the victim and the user and then swallows them. Both souls are then forced to do battle inside the death god's stomach for eternity. He glanced at his angel and smiled at her response prior to continuing. The old man didn't have enough strength to remove his soul completely, so he did the next best thing. Again smirking, he took the snake's dream away from him. She questioned, what do you mean? He looked at her and said, if you can't use your arms, you can't make hand seals, and if you can't use hand seals, Orochimaru's dream was to learn every jutsu that has ever existed or will ever exist, he said with a sadistic smile. So the old man settled with removing the part of the snake's soul that allowed him to use his arms and ripping it out. You can't use jutsu, Ino exclaimed, startled, before grinning at the snake Sanin's bad luck. Exactly, Naruto said, putting a tight grip around her waist and then caressing the bandages that were there. She blushed as he said, you have such a lovely figure. In a husky voice after that, he reached down to her legs and touched the bandages she had applied. It's too bad you have to hide it behind these troublesome bandages of yours. You'd look even sexier without them. Maybe I should just. He began to take them off. After blushing violently, Ino composed herself. She pushed his hands away in a hurry. She questioned, are you crazy? My parents would kill me if I did that, she exclaimed in shock because they felt it offered at least some modesty. Her parents only permitted her to wear her regular clothes while wearing the bandages. Nevertheless, she had to acknowledge to herself that she was tempted to flaunt her body in front of Naruto. But they look so uncomfortable. A gorgeous body like yours should be allowed to breathe freely and unhindered, he said, ignoring her hands and trying again after he succeeded in removing the bandages from her right leg. Ino swallowed. I can't, she said, adding, I'll look skanky. I don't think you will. Naruto rolled his eyes, adding, I think you'll look more angelic. He then carefully removed the bandages that had come loose. But Ino tried to say, but Naruto put his index finger on her lip and cut her off, just as she had done to him before, because she was so red that she would make a cherry blush. As he removed the bandages from her right leg, he said, Shish, no buts. You don't have to stay like this all day, he explained. I just want a little peek at your glorious body when I'm done. You can wrap them up again. Just think of this as a preview to when you wear your lovely hair down for me. When you do, I'll make this feel even better, he said, finally taking off the bandages. Then he started running his hands slowly up and down her bare leg. With a moan, she closed her eyes contentedly, trying to recall the topic of their argument. Your skin is so soft, like silk but warmer, Naruto said as he continued to massage her leg. You are truly an angel. Only something that resides within heaven itself could have skin this soft, this smooth, this perfect. Ino did not try to stop him, but she blushed at his compliment and shuddered briefly at his gentle touch. You don't really mind this, do you? He asked innocently as he started to slowly remove the bandages from her left leg. This time, he took it easier and started petting her other leg. Ino was unable to focus, to be honest. It felt fantastic, and no, was her quiet response. After giving her a smile, Naruto started removing the bandages from her waist. He questioned, are you going to try to stop me? No, she replied. Naruto grinned. He sensed an effortless triumph. Do you want me to stop? He whispered into her ear as he leaned forward. With a shudder, Ino muttered, no. He unwrapped the bandages around her waist and started slowly moving his hands up and down, saying, that's my girl. As he was doing this, he moved his mouth to her throat and began to nibble on it while dragging his lips over it. She closed her eyes and groaned. In order to give him easier access to her throat, she pushed her head back. After a moment, He had an idea that he believed she would like. He moved his lips across her jawline and asked, "Does a massage sound good to you right now? Would you like me to give you one?" "Yes please," was her softly spoken response after a loud moan. Kneeling over her, he laid her gently on her stomach on the ground and proceeded to massage her body slowly. Whether or not her skin was exposed, she closed her eyes and rested her head on her hands. Naruto kept giving her body a slow, gentle massage. "Whatever I did to deserve an angel like yourself, I'll never know, but I'll always be grateful for it." Even though he couldn't see it, Ino flushed. "You've made me feel so happy, so wanted, so appreciated," Ino stated to him. "I'm pretty sure it's me that doesn't deserve you." He leaned over her, looked down, and moved his lips to her neck, nibbling and occasionally taking love bites. She sighed and shuddered. "Ino-chan, you deserve all of those things and more," he said. "You deserve to be praised, to be loved. I'm simply giving you what you deserve, and besides, the chance to make you happy is too good to pass up. I feel honored being able to touch a goddess like you. I'm enjoying this almost as much as you are." "I doubt that," she sighed, blushing even more at his endless and incredibly flattering compliments. He laughed and kept massaging her upper back and shoulders. Naruto said, "This isn't so bad, now is it, my dear?" "No," Ino muttered once more. "Please lower," she said. With a sly smile, he started to gently run his hands down her lower back. He asked his sweetheart, "Does this feel good?" She sighed and said, Yes, very good. Harder please." She asked. At that moment, she was in heaven. Ino groaned even louder as Naruto applied more pressure. "Just relax, my angel. For the next few hours, I will give you the attention and treatment you deserve, that of a goddess." "You already do," Ino thought with a sigh of delight, but she chose to keep her mouth shut and let him continue massaging her. "God, this is amazing," she exclaimed. Given the possibilities, she fervently prayed that her hair would grow back as soon as possible. "If it's this good now," and he said he'd make it even better when my hair grows back and I let it down. The picture would not be taken for several hours. No, what they believed they were doing was not done. End of flashback. The date, day, and time the picture was taken, as well as the identity of the subject, were written on the back of the picture. "Me with Ino, my angel," was listed. When Ino saw this, she had started crying before she calmed down and put the photo in her bag with the one of him with Team 7. For what it was worth, which wasn't much, Hinata had to comfort her for a few moments. Perhaps she would cut out the pictures of Sakura and Sasuke, enlarge them, and use them for target practice in honor of her late boyfriend. She also gathered his houseplants and pledged to keep them alive. The two girls asked Tenten to set up a surprise in the apartment so the villagers wouldn't have the last laugh. With great pleasure, she placed a tripwire-activated bomb at the apartment door. The three girls waited while hiding. As expected, a group of villagers had come to demolish the area. Their fate was sealed when the village chief kicked in the door. Boom! The village was rocked by a massive explosion, and Naruto's apartment burst into flames. The blast left many of the mob with broken bones and severe burn injuries, but no one died. The landlord across the street was having a childish outburst at the sight and was cursing wildly. Really, the outburst wasn't necessary. After all, who in hell would purchase the property? The only two Konoha 12, now 11, members who did not mourn Naruto's passing were Sakura Haruno and, of course, Sasuke Uchiha. You could almost feel sorry for Sakura at this point because she had grown so enamored and obsessed with Sasuke. Almost is the operative word. It turns out that long before the Rookie 9 had graduated, Sakura's mother, Kaide Haruno, had told her daughter that Naruto had the Kyuubi sealed inside of him. Sakura had taken on her mother's perspective of Naruto, which held that he was a demon who didn't deserve to live. Sakura followed her mother's advice and acted on behalf of the civilian council, of which Kaide was a member, to make Naruto's life in the academy and beyond miserable. In some incredibly cruel twist of fate, she was able to win Naruto's love. Her friends turned against her after she revealed to them that she was already aware of Naruto's demon and then detailed the actions that the civilian council had instructed her to take. They stayed faithful to their late friend regardless of what Sakura or anybody else would say. She was shocked when this occurred and believed that the demon had hypnotized them. She tried everything she could to break them free from the demon's grip. Sakura attempted to assist Ino and Hinata after learning of their obsession with Naruto. Both Ino and her former rival, friend, would never forget the altercation they had when they learned of the blonde's relationship with Naruto. Rewind. Ino was eating while seated at the Ichiraku ramen vendor since Naruto had taken her here on a date and she liked the ramen she had been returning. She also liked Tuchi and Ayame because she felt that they understood how sad she was about Naruto's passing. Out of the corner of Ino's eye, she saw a blur of pink. She sighed as she glanced at the source and then returned her attention to her ramen. Sakura was walking down the street toward her. ostentatiously oblivious to her blonde friend's presence. But Ino knew she was there to greet her. Although she had been dreading this encounter for a while, she knew it would eventually occur. The blonde inhaled deeply and braced herself. Sakura called out to her, "Ino pig." With a false sense of surprise. "What are you doing here?" she asked. Before turning to face her friend and erstwhile rival, Ino sighed and muttered, "Here we go." Ino said, "Hey forehead," in a sad voice, and in response to her friend's inquiry, "I'm eating." Sakura ignored Ino's response except for rolling her eyes. "So, why haven't you been visiting Sasuke-kun in the hospital?" she asked, standing in front of her friend, the question Ino knew she would ask. She gave the straightforward response, "Because I don't like Sasuke anymore." Sakura had apparently been unaware for a long time that she was Naruto's girlfriend. Naturally, this was going to change. "Wait, does this mean we're not rivals for Sasuke-kun's affections anymore?" Sakura asked, incredulously. What do you mean?" "Yep," Ino replied simply, nodding, "I've moved on." Sakura was shocked to learn that Ino was almost as devoted to Sasuke as she was, and that she had now outgrown him entirely. The pinkhead pondered what might have caused her friend to undergo this transformation. She inquired, "When did this happen?" Ino answered, "Since I met someone else." Sakura's eyes grew wide. Who could possibly entice Ino away from Sasuke with their charm and beauty? She questioned, "Someone else? Someone else?" was Ino's simple response. She chanted to herself, "Let it go, let it go, let it go," hoping Sakura would simply stop talking about it. Yes, as if that will actually occur. Sakura became irritated with her friend's straightforward responses and inquired, "Who?" Damn it, Ino thought to herself. She chose to aggravate Sakura even more, even though she knew she wouldn't put up with this. "Someone," she replied, smiling to herself at her friend's annoyance. Under her breath, Sakura snarled, "Who are you talking about?" Shaking her head, Ino said, "I don't think I'll tell you." Sakura was now sulky and said, "Why not?" in a tone reminiscent of a child complaining that they didn't get their way. "At least give me a hint." "I don't know," Ino blurted out, pretending to be unsure. "Oh come on," yelled Sakura, irate, "tell me something." "Fine," was Ino's sigh of surrender. Sakura became alert and asked excitedly, "Is he someone we know?" Ino gave a nod. Sakura inquired, "Is it Shikamaru?" "I mean, he's okay I guess, but how do you deal with that pessimistic attitude of his?" Sakura instantly thought of Ino's teammates, who were the people closest to her. Ino responded, "It's not Shikamaru," rolling her eyes. "Is it Choji?" Sakura asked after giving it some more thought. "He's kind of big, don't you think?" she said, uttering the name incredulously. "It's not Choji," was Ino's response, after glancing at her friend. Sakura pondered, but was unable to come up with another person their age that Ino would be interested in. With frustration, she questioned, "Then who is it?" If nothing else, this served as a pleasant diversion from Ino's grief and heartache over Naruto's passing, so she grinned. She made the decision to continue this for as long as possible. Her advice to Sakura was to keep guessing. With a sigh, Sakura concluded that this was the only method to elicit a response from Ino. "Is he the same age as we are?" she inquired. Ino gave a nod. "Is he someone we know from the academy?" She gave another nod. "Is he someone I've met before?" Ino gave another nod. "Is he cute?" Ino gave a fourth nod. Sakura considered all of the people she had ever met who fit this description, but she couldn't think of anyone. "Come on, give me some kind of hint. Can I meet this mystery man of yours?" inquired Sakura, with a sigh. As soon as she heard these words, Ino felt depressed and her eyes began to well up with tears, which she suppressed. This question also saddened Tucci and Ayame, who had been listening to the entire conversation. "Ino, what's wrong?" Sakura asked, perplexed and alarmed by her friend's distraught expression, wondering what she could have said to trigger such a response. Downcast, Ino said, You can't meet him." "Why?" Sakura inquired, perplexed by these remarks. Ino clarified, because he died recently." Sakura considered these remarks. "Did you just die? Do we know anyone with D?" Then she discovered the solution. No, it wouldn't be him, could it? Incredulously, she thought. Sakura paused to collect her thoughts before whispering the name. "Is it Naruto?" With a nod, Ino muttered, "Yes." Sakura was taken aback. Naruto and Ino. She thought to herself, this must be some sort of sick joke. Sakura chose to ask the question that was bothering her the most after a protracted period of silence. "How long ago did this happen?" With a sigh, Ino informed her friend, "Since 2 weeks before the Chunin exam finals started." Sakura asked, her eyes widening, "How did it happen?" Ino breathed deeply. Naruto came into my family's store. She said, he needed help with something, and while I was looking through the back of the store for something he needed, we started talking. He asked me why I liked Sasuke, and when I realized that I didn't know and how shallow I was, I started crying. When that happened, Naruto was there for me. He held me and told me everything was alright and that I wasn't shallow. Ino began to feel tears well up in the corners of her eyes. He told me I was beautiful, smart, and kind, and that Sasuke didn't deserve me if he didn't realize that. As she continued, I've never felt so happy and appreciated in my entire life. We kissed and had been going out ever since, sadly. Sakura paused for a long time to take in the information. Her best friend and erstwhile rival, Ino Yamanaka, had been seeing the Kyuubi incarnate. No, there's no way. She thought, how was she able to date that thing? Before something occurred to her, she thought, she must have been hypnotized, and she must still be under his control. She then went to offer her friend some consolation and to share her thoughts. Sakura had no idea how poorly the subsequent attempts at consolation and persuasion would turn out. After 8 months of writer's block, I gave up on the idea of a shouting match between Sakura and Ino, but I couldn't bring myself to completely erase the flashback, so you'll have to take my word for it in the following sentence and the paragraph. Sakura ended up in the hospital after a fierce argument with Ino that resulted in a number of broken bones, a broken jaw, which will stop her from talking, and too many insults directed at Naruto. She was also beaten into a coma. As it happens, training with Naruto was very beneficial. A few days after Sakura was discharged from the hospital, she had a similar argument with Hinata and was readmitted right away. The Pinkette suffered a great deal of internal bleeding in that one. When the villagers found out, they also started referring to them as demon horse and other such terms, since they would be severely beaten if they called either girl by this or any other name aloud. The majority of the villagers eventually kept this opinion to themselves. Conversely, Sasuke was just Sasuke. The memories of his battle with Naruto at the Valley of the End, which he lost but never acknowledged, were causing him to brood more than ever. He detested losing to the so-called dead last of his academy graduation year. What chance did he have of defeating Itachi if he couldn't defeat Naruto? He hoped that would change with the Mangekyo Sharingan. Kakashi had fulfilled his pledge to teach Sasuke how to use the Mangekyo theoretically, not practically, of course. He would become blind from prolonged use of the Mangekyo. After killing Naruto, Sasuke was receiving more praise than ever before, and his fangirl count had almost tripled, but his peers harbored a deep and abiding hatred for him. They disregarded him and accused him of being weak for attempting to rise to power by taking the easy route. The majority of his fellow shinobi avoided him and, unless compelled to do so, refused to collaborate with the traitor. Many even made the decision to regularly vandalize the Uchiha district. However, it was the Konohamaru Corps that taught Naruto's 2 former teammates the meaning of karma. The children alternated who would suffer at the end of every 2 weeks, doing everything they could to make Sasuke and Sakura's lives fucking miserable beyond description. No, I won't be coming up with any specific pranks for this fic. I tried, I really tried, but I'm not very good at coming up with them. If you don't like it, fuck you. In Naruto's memory, Konohamaru himself vowed to become Hokage and to bring unspeakable misery to Sakura and Sasuke. Tsunade grinned and pictured Naruto, proud of the Corps, saying, "They grow up so fast," with anime tears in his eyes. Then she returned to focusing on her work. Naruto's passing also had a profound impact on his friends outside of Konoha. This included, among others, Gaara, Princess Koyuki Kazuhana, and the residents of Wave Country. Along with his siblings Temari and Kankuro, Gaara was the first to hear the news and was by far the most affected. For the first time since his uncle Yashimaru had deceived him as a child, the Ichibi Jinchuriki had truly started crying. Soon after being informed, he and his siblings left the village. Tsunade sighed. The previous year had also seen a number of concerning incidents. Kakashi's testimony at the start of Sasuke Uchiha's trial, which claimed that Sasuke had lost control of the curse mark and attacked Naruto in a psychotic rage, was the first event. She was also upset about how light of a punishment he received for killing his fellow shinobi and betraying Konoha. Regarding that case, the council was split. The civilian council and the elders, including Danzo Shimura and the former Sandyami Hokage teammates Homura Mitokado and Kaharu Utatane, were all too willing to forgive the Uchiha escapee because they believed that the village needed the Sharingan of the Uchiha clan to be strong. However, because they believed the boy was too mentally and emotionally unstable to be permitted to wield it, the clan heads and the Hokage herself, who personally desired to crucify the runt, wanted him to be imprisoned, put to death, and/or have his bloodline sealed. They also thought he would flee to rejoin Orochimaru if he were not arrested. The idea made them all shudder. What would happen if the Sharingan was in the hands of the Snake Sanin? Even prior to his passing, The majority of clan leaders had either taken a neutral position on the blonde or defended Naruto, some of whom found his antics hilarious. The only clan leaders who had ever disapproved of him were Hiyashi Hyuga and Sume Inuzuka, both of whom have since changed their opinions. Sume believed Naruto to be the Kyuubi incarnate and had detested him, holding him responsible for her husband's death during the Kyuubi attack. She was also furious that the boy had defeated her son Kiba in the preliminary round of the Chunin exam. Sume told her son about Naruto's past when she visited him in the hospital and noticed how distraught he was over his death. She also advised him to be relieved that his father's killer was no longer alive and that his death should have occurred a long time ago. Kiba threw his food tray at her as a result, telling her to leave and lessen her narrow-mindedness. His actual words were a little more colorful than that, but you get the idea. She also learned that Hana, her daughter, was disgusted by her mother's actions and shared Kiba's viewpoint after expressing regret to her children. Sume prayed for forgiveness after reflecting on her behavior and how she had contributed to the boy's suffering over the course of the following few days. Hiyashi was a close friend of the Yondaime and, in spite of his better judgment, he blamed Naruto for his death, which is why he he disliked, Naruto. Though no one ever verified it, Hiyashi had long suspected Naruto's ancestry. He detested seeing his dead friend every time he looked at Naruto's face. But after his battle with his nephew Neji in the Chunin exam finals, his opinion of Naruto had shifted. In addition to defeating the Hyuga prodigy, Naruto also lessened Neji's animosity toward the main Hyuga clan branch. Hinata's behavior change following Naruto's death also had an impact on Hiyashi's perception of Naruto. For several months following the blonde's passing, Hinata suffered from severe depression. Hiyashi, who is typically heartless and cold, felt sorry for his oldest daughter since his own wife's death while giving birth to little Hanabi. He had not witnessed anyone so distraught. He had grown more empathetic toward Hinata over the previous year and had started training her at her request in an effort to become the strong person her father and Naruto would have desired her to be. The elders and civilian council comprised the majority of the council, and their decision had prevailed despite the clan head's disagreement. The Uchiha traitor was placed under a 6-month suspension and given an Anbu squad to keep watch over him constantly, in addition to being barred from using his curse mark under any circumstances and facing the death penalty. Though he couldn't since Jiraiya sealed it, he was given a minimum of 3 years before he could be promoted in any way. Additionally, the council had granted Sasuke almost everything he requested, including strong jutsu. They even attempted to make Jiraiya train him, but the Toad Sage refused, claiming that Sasuke was unworthy of being his apprentice due to his heritage and that he had vowed never to take on another apprentice that same day. The Sannin departed the village and have not been heard from since. But Tsunade had only consented to take Sakura Haruno under her apprenticeship after letting Ino Yamanaka serve as her senior apprentice. Tsunade frowned. The council undoubtedly wanted to make Sasuke the next Hokage, even though they would not acknowledge it. Not while she was watching with the worst missions she could think of. The Slug Sannin had done everything in her power to make Sakura's and Sasuke's lives unbearably miserable. She occasionally gave the Konohamaru Corps orders to cause massive disasters, which were then cleaned up by Team 7 since the Uchiha viewed hanging out with the Pinkette as a kind of torture. She almost always grouped the two targets of her ire together. She hoped Sakura would realize how futile her attempts to accuse the traitor were and either give up and admit she was mistaken or be devastated by it. No luck thus far, but you never know. Undoubtedly, these incidents were concerning. However, there was one thing that was far superior to them. Information about this event was on its way to the Slug Sannin's desk, where she had an ever-increasing amount of paperwork. A knock on the door was heard. "What now?" sighed Tsunade after giving it some thought. She said, "Enter." A Chunin from Konoha came in. He bowed and said, "Hokage-sama," before adding, "We just got word from the team that was sent to River Country." Then he left a message on her desk. Tsunade was aware of the dispatched team. Rock Lee, Tenten, Kakashi Hitaki, Neji Hyuga, and Sasuke Uchiha were among them. Her eyes grew wide as she read the note. "Thank you," she said with a sigh, and then she told the Chunin, "You can leave now." After giving a nod, he walked out, shutting the door. According to the letter she was just given, the team she sent had discovered that residents of Katabami Kinzan village were being abducted, taken to a nearby gold mine, and made to labor against their will. Later, it was found that the kidnappings were carried out by a group of individuals led by Raiga Kurasuki, a former member of the Seven Swordsmen of the Mist. A monster broke through the mine, killed all of Raiga's men, and then challenged and defeated the swordsman in single combat before killing him before the team could devise a plan to free the enslaved people. After stealing Raiga's notorious lighting fangs, the beast ran away. Only 2 of Raiga's subordinates were spared. An older boy named Karashi, a local villager who thought Raiga would strengthen him, and a young disabled boy named Renara, who had some kind of bloodline that could see through walls, cast illusions, and even neutralize the Byakugan. While the former was being brought back to Konoha to receive treatment for his disability, the latter was returned to Katabami Kinzan. The body of Raiga was never found. The demon was the name of the beast that killed Raiga and his men. Yes, exactly, once more, the notorious demon had been spotted. Throughout the elemental nations, there have been countless reports of seeing and coming into contact with a demon-like creature for the past year. 2 months after Naruto's passing, the first sightings took place in Wave Country. There were rumors that the rest of Gado's men would return with more mercenaries to try to retake the nation. When a group of Konoha shinobi arrived at the bandit camp to look into the bandit activity, they discovered something horrifying. A slaughterhouse had replaced the camp that had housed more than 200 armed men. Blood and mangled and disembodied corpses were everywhere, and the tents and supplies were destroyed. Only 2 survivors had been discovered by the team. Before the team could provide him with the necessary medical care, one survivor bled to death after being calmed down. The other had given some information, but even then, he was still trembling and scanning the area frantically out of fear that the monster would return. According to the bandit, a huge beast had broken into the camp and started killing everything it could find. According to his description, the beast was tall, muscular, had black armored skin, razor-sharp teeth and claws, and eyes that were demonic and blood-red. It wobbled around on all fours, like a lizard, and walked upright like a man. According to him, the beast's head had an unusual shape and resembled a fox, with 2 horns that protruded from either side. Resembling ears, it had a long, fox-like tail and broad shoulders. According to the survivor, some of the men were even consumed by the beast several times during the assault. It snatched a few of the men, killed them, and then, as the victim was presumably sucked into its body, a strange dark red and black substance would cover both the beast and the victim. When the team went to pick up the survivor the following morning, he had stabbed himself in the heart with a knife he had somehow managed to obtain. Ending his life, Tsunade had intended to bring him back to the village for additional interrogation. The demon left a trail of blood and bodies in its wake after being sighted in several countries over the course of the following few months. It primarily hunted mercenaries and bandits, but it gradually began to pursue more difficult enemies. Raiga appeared to be the most recent victim of this beast's bloodlust, which soon turned its attention to missing Nin. Tsunade was surprised because this was the first time the creature had ever faced a person of Raiga's caliber. The oddest thing, though, was how the beast, or rather, how it attacked, was described by eyewitnesses. The descriptions of the creature's mode of attack were always different, even though the physical characteristics stayed constant. Numerous witnesses claimed to have seen it use its enormous, razor-sharp claws to slash through its enemies. Some claimed that its arms resembled hammers. Some even claimed it could shoot a whip-like tendril from its arms that could cut through enemies or draw them in. No matter how many times the stories were told, they always seemed to be different. In spite of this fact, the demon had benefited a number of individuals, chief among them being Gaara, the recently appointed Godem Kazekage. Matsuri, a student of the Kazekage, had apparently been abducted by a group of shinobi from the impoverished Takumi village who identified themselves as the 4 Celestial Symbols men. In order to use the Shukaku's power to bring their village founder back to life and exact some sort of retribution on the elemental nations for abandoning them when they needed assistance, they tried to entice Gaara to them and then capture him. The demon found Matsuri, killed her captors, and returned her to Suna unharmed before Gaara could call Konoha for assistance. Following their conversation, Gaara formally allied with the creature, stating that it was Tsunagakure's friend and that Suna's gates would always be open to it. Naturally, this gave the demon a certain amount of diplomatic immunity for fear of inciting conflict with Suna. None of the hidden villages could send hunter nin to pursue the beast as a result. The beast only had a brief warning telling onlookers to avoid it. It had no official entry in the bingo book. Additionally, the beast had become very well known and respected in some of the smaller nations. In Stone Country, it was once cited. In addition to apprehending a wanted criminal, it assisted a former civilian-turned-bounty hunter in clearing his name of charges related to crimes the apprehended thief had committed. The most peculiar aspect was that the demon's reward for aiding the village was to kill the thief itself. The odd request was granted by the villagers, and the thief was last seen being dragged out of the village while yelling and kicking. Later, the monster was seen in Bird Country, where it discovered a ruse behind a purported ghost that had been haunting the area for a while and killed a group of missing nin known as the Wandering Ninja. It was spotted shortly after in Vegetable Country, where it slew a gang of shinobi called the Janin. These 3 were killed before they could carry out their attempted coup against the country's daimyo. Only a great deal of blood was discovered at the scene of the fight between the beast and the 3 brothers, as was the case with several other scenes of the beast's conflicts. In the weeks that followed, the demon aided a village in the rice country, the same nation in which Otogakure was situated, and assisted a Rouge Ninja clan member in redeeming himself by preventing the other members of his clan from demolishing a dam that would have flooded a neighboring village that the group was threatening. The clan member who defected gave his life in the attempt. Even though they were successful, the demon then became so furious that it massacred the remaining members of the renegade clan before abandoning the grateful villagers. The Shinobazu were a group of missing nin who were trying to murder a former member of their group before he turned himself in, but the beast killed them unfortunately. The subsequent battle resulted in the prisoner's death. 1. After that, the demon vanished, only to reappear during its battle with Raiga. In any case, the demon mostly avoided the main hidden villages, with the exception of Suna. Tsunade had no idea that was going to change the tea country. In a forest, a man with an umbrella on his back and a rain headband was running from tree to tree. This man appeared to be a typical shinobi, but he was more than that. He was a Class A missing nin from Konoha named Aoi Rokusho, an Omegakure Jonin. He had no specific destination in mind when he ran. All he was doing was escaping for his life. In a panicked voice, he thought, "Damn it, we only came here as hired nin. We only needed to finish a basic task, then this thing had to appear." During the Todoroki shrine race, Aoi and a group of AIM genin arrived in tea country and were employed by the Wagarashi clan to prevent a competitor, Idate Morino, a former student of Aoi's, from taking first place. The Wagarashi clan would no longer have any authority over tea country if Idate prevailed. Aoi believed they had everything planned out and had devised the ideal ambush to halt Idate. They hadn't taken a monster into account. The beast appeared out of nowhere, found where they were hiding, and started fighting them in less than 60 seconds. The genin were killed. The beast rejected everything that was thrown at it, forcing Aoi to back off despite his best efforts to fight back. Aoi was sprinting as hard as he could, but he could hear the beast catching up to him gradually. "I can't outrun it, so I'll have to fight it," Aoi thought, concluding that it was useless. In a nearby clearing, Aoi came to a halt and faced the monster, and the monster ceased. After a few seconds of staring at one another, the demon surprised Aoi by opening its mouth and speaking. With a demonic voice that was not as deep as many would have thought and that sounded like King Minno's voice from Dante's Inferno, it said, "So you finally decided to stop running away, eh?" Before laughing and smirking nefariously. Good, it's much more entertaining when the prey fights back," it explained. Aoi swallowed, but he remained calm in spite of his panic. He paused before continuing, "Why are you hunting me and my team? Did another clan hire you to stop us from interfering with the race?" he asked, wondering what the hell he did to bring this monstrosity down upon him. "I may be a jonin, but I know when I'm outmatched in speed." "Oh no, my dear man. I could care less about what happens in this trivial little race. Besides, do I look like someone that people want to be around, much less hire?" the demon said courteously, shaking its head before changing its mind and saying, "Wait, don't answer that." The beast's courteous tone slightly unsettled Aoi, who asked in confusion, "Then why did you attack me? And why did you kill and eat my genin squad? This thing wants what the fuck?" Remembering how the creature had eaten the genin, he thought to himself, shivering in his mind. "Kill them? Yes, eat them? No, I merely absorbed them into my own body so I could put their memories to good use," the creature said, tilting its head to the side. "Memories?" Aoi asked, perplexed. "It's nothing you need to worry about, and as to why I am hunting you, well, I thought you would make a decent challenge to test my abilities against. It's nothing personal really. I also wanted to acquire the Nidame Hokage's Raijin blade I know you possess," the beast clarified. "So you hunt shinobi for sport?" Aoi inquired, pausing to consider how he could defeat the creature before him. "More or less," the beast shrugged and said. "Now then, was there anything else you wanted to ask before we finish this?" Aoi grabbed his senbon umbrella on his back and shook his head, saying, "No, that's pretty much it." He threw his umbrella into the air and exclaimed, "It was nice talking to you, but now it's time to die." Ninja art. Senbon rainstorm. High in the sky, it hovered there for a while. After that, it started spinning quickly and ejecting thousands of senbon needles, which eventually found the demon. With a demon-like grin, the beast held its left arm out in front of it. To put it mildly, what transpired next was unexpected. Before a shield materialized where the demon's arm had been, the beast's arm's skin started to change and pulse with an odd energy. When the senbon struck its target, a lot of dust was kicked up the air. "Shield or not, those senbon can pierce up to 5 millimeters of soiled steel," said Aoi with a sly smile. "That thing couldn't have stopped it," he thought smugly. The dust eventually lifted, revealing a sight that Aoi would fucking detest. With the senbon protruding from its shield and strewn all over the ground, Aoi was shocked to see the demon in all its splendor, utterly unharmed. "Is that all you got?" the beast asked mockingly as it spread out the shield and smirked at Aoi. After rising above his astonishment and snarling, Aoi made a tiger hand seal and yelled, "Water clone technique." 3 water clones materialized and assumed combat positions. To Aoi's surprise and annoyance, the demon smirked and said, "Clones A," before adding, "Well, I can play that game too." It then made a ram hand seal and yelled, "Shadow clone technique." 3 shadow clones materialized. "It's just fucking amazing that it can use jutsu," he thought sarcastically. The clones charged at one another and started fighting. "Now then, while our clones are distracted, shall we go?" the demon said, clearing its throat. "Gladly," was Aoi's response, as he smirked and took out Raijin. Aoi saw the demon raise both of its arms, which changed into huge gauntlets with spear-like tips in place of its hands. After that, the beast assumed a fighting stance. For a moment, the two stood still, waiting for a leaf that had fallen between them to fall to the ground. They charged when it did. Aoi stabbed the demon with the blade. The demon used its arms to form a X. To block it, Aoi retreated and landed with a downward blow. The demon used one arm to block. A painful electrical shock went through the beast's body as the blade connected. Aoi grinned as it winced. "Even if the Raijin doesn't hit you, you'll still feel the shock from the blade," the demon said. "I can handle it," adding, "I've felt worse," before charging once more. The shocks were growing worse as their blades repeatedly collided. The beast made a series of hand seals and declared, "It's time to end this." It exclaimed, "Mist Servant Technique," before a number of its ink-like clones materialized. Startled, Aoi said, "How do you know how to do that? Only ninja from a megacure know how to use that technique." "Like I said before, their memories can be useful," the demon grinned. Aoi recalled that the beast claimed to have used their memories by absorbing the rain genin. "Why, you somehow gained the genin's memories and knew exactly how to perform the technique," he said. "Exactly, their memories, talents, and skills are now mine," the demon said triumphantly, grinning and nodding, "and soon yours will be as well." "Don't get cocky, too can play at that game," Aoi said, evoking a number of additional mist servants as he recovered from his shock. The monster grinned and said, "Perhaps, but I have something you don't have." "Really? And what's that?" Aoi inquired. The demon uttered the word, "creativity," before its servants jumped into the air all around Aoi. Aoi positioned himself defensively and prepared to attack, but then an unforeseen circumstance occurred. As they passed directly through his clones, the mist servants exploded into an ink-like substance and spattered all over Aoi. Before he could express his disgust, Aoi came to a realization. He could definitely feel the black substance on himself. Even though mist servants are only genjutsu, it was sticky and wet. He was almost reminded of. When Aoi realized what was going to happen, his eyes widened. It was too late by then. In addition to shouting, "Fire release," "Grand Fireball," and performing hand seals, the beast also threw a fireball from its mouth and directed it at the black material surrounding him. The dark fluid erupted into fire. Aoi screamed as the fire consumed him, and his mist servants vanished as he collapsed from the agony. Water clones were created and dispersed around the fire by the beast, which extinguished the flames with the falling liquid. The demon went toward its fallen adversary. A badly burned Aoi looked up and said, "But when did you summon the rain?" His voice was weak from the pain. "You used water clones made of the black rain technique and tricked me into thinking they were mist servants," it clarified, just before I stepped into the clearing. "Not bad, demon," Aoi said, laughing, looking up at his opponent. "Not bad at all." Then he passed away for a moment. The demon gazed at his dead opponent, then it bent down over Aoi's body. And then ate it. The demon's body contracted, and its skin started to warp and pulse. After taking Aoi's appearance, the beast examined itself and then got to its feet. It heard a voice in the back of its mind with a tone of admiration. Kyuubi remarked, "Well done, Kit, you've defeated another opponent, which will help you finish your plan." Namikaze, Naruto Uzumaki, gave a mental nod. Naruto had been preparing the ideal kind of retaliation for the past year against his former teammate and sensei, as well as the shinobi and civilians who had harmed him as a child. He left his temporary tomb and promised to return someday to annihilate those who had betrayed him and those who had even remotely contributed to his childhood abuse, but not just yet. No, it was far too soon to go back there immediately after his apparent death. For a number of reasons, he chose to let everyone believe he was dead, even though it hurt. The first is that he had fallen entirely from the public's consciousness. There were benefits to being dead without a doubt, the Akatsuki would learn of his passing and would no longer have any motive to attack the village or to bother Konoha. Furthermore, if Orochimaru knew Naruto was still alive, he would undoubtedly seek retribution against him for stopping him from recruiting Sasuke Uchiha. He did not want the village to be destroyed. Even though he hated the majority of its residents, quite a few of the people he cared about were still living there. The second reason is that he was favored by the element of surprise, unaware of the sword of Damocles hanging over their heads. The traders and villagers were all arrogant and self-assured, thinking the demon was dead. He would take advantage of this, wait, bide his time, and then strike when they least expected it. The expressions on their faces when they saw him alive and in front of them would make the wait worthwhile, especially after they witnessed his newly acquired skills. The third reason is that he wasn't prepared, not in the least bit. The elders and civilian council members would undoubtedly send a number of elite shinobi to claim his head once he had carried out his revenge plan and revealed himself in his human form, which he intended to do. This is especially true once they realize it's Naruto Uzumaki, the demon, for whom they have long-standing and misguided animosities. Regardless, there will undoubtedly be a number of shinobi pursuing him. Keeping that in mind, he made a self-promise to come back only when he was strong enough to protect himself and the people he loved. The fourth and final reason is that he desired the ideal form of vengeance. His goal was to annihilate his adversaries, not merely kill them. All he wanted to do was drag them through their own hells. He desired for them to suffer as much as he had before he put an end to their miserable, pointless lives. He would take everything away from them in front of their eyes, in a sense, rake them across the coals. In Konoha, a good number of people had to endure suffering. Sasuke Uchiha was the first. In addition to killing him, Naruto wanted the pampered little runt to suffer because he had so readily offered him friendship. Naruto had granted Sasuke the status of his best friend and rival, only to have the Uchiha spit it in his face. Sasuke would pay a heavy price for that small error. The second was Kakashi Hitaki. After everything the blonde had done for him, Naruto's former sensei would pay for his petty favoritism and betrayal because he betrayed his sensei's son. He will suffer. Last but not least were the elders, the members of the civilian council, the villagers, and the shinobi who had made Naruto's early years so wretched they would be punished for hurting Naruto, their desire for power, and, above all, for disobeying his father's final request and for being their hero and savior. He would take what these ungrateful fools valued most and destroy it in front of them in order to utterly destroy them. Naruto was already aware of the so-called purpose he intended to take away from Sasuke. He would deny the final, loyal Uchiha the opportunity to exact revenge on his brother. This implied that Itachi had to perish at Naruto's hands, of course, but not for a while, as he was aware that he was not yet strong enough to face the older of the Uchiha siblings. In order to kill the elder Uchiha survivor, he had to gain a lot of strength first. He was also aware of what he would do to his beloved Uchiha pupil, Kakashi. Naruto felt he owed his departed friend everything because he was aware of the tale of how the Cyclops had taken away both his best friend, Obito Uchiha, and his eye by helping to train the final, loyal, Uchiha to become strong enough to achieve his objective and become a legendary ninja. He hoped to atone for the death of his friend. Naruto's task was straightforward. He only needed to kill Sasuke directly in front of the Cyclopean idiot to destroy him completely. He wasn't entirely sure how to handle the council members and civilians just yet. Something that united them all in some way, shape, or form had to be something that they all cared about. But what? Given his newfound ability to change his shape, Naruto made the easy decision to wait until the villagers had completed the majority of their celebrations of his passing before infiltrating Konoha to spy on them and discover their collective weakness. Then Naruto picked up the Raijin blade from the ground and transformed back into his armored form. Though he was a little let down that the Senbon umbrella had been destroyed in the fire, he thought, I got a nice little bonus from this one too. A few weeks earlier, the leader of the group that called itself Shinobazu had given him a giant drill and a similar umbrella. So it didn't matter. Despite having no use for the drill, he chose to keep it as a precaution. The Biju said, they aren't going to be happy when they find out that the infamous demon has acquired not only Raiga's lightning fangs, but the Nidaim's blade as well. Kyuubi mentally nodded. Yes, that's one more advantage we have over Konoha and a decent bit of leverage as well. A missing nin is one thing, but a demon? Well, we both know they're not exactly fond of those. Kyuubi smiled at the thought of the council's response to this development. Yes, the boy replied with a smile, but if I want to try to attract attention, I think I need a better title than the demon. Any ideas come to mind? Kyuubi asked, nodding. Naruto considered what Kyuubi had explained to him about his newfound powers. According to the fox, he was the next stage of human evolution. The perfect human specimen, the height of perfection. With a mental nod, Naruto said, I have one. Kyuubi awaited his next move. I am the first, and possibly the only, of my kind, the ultimate life form, and the ideal weapon. I am the prototype, he declared with triumph. The prototype, huh? Not bad, Kyuubi laughed, adding, it certainly fits and it's got a nice ring to it as well. I'm glad you like it. Naruto came back, grinning at the idea. Now let's get going. We still have more terror and fear to spread, and hopefully there will be witnesses to spread my newfound name. He hesitated just as he was about to leave. Kyuubi said, Kit? Something wrong? Naruto was pondering, was a trip home in order? By now, would everyone have finished celebrating or lamenting his passing? Before we do that, I think it's time to go and visit home again, he decided after giving it some thought. The question that Kyuubi asked was, why would you do that? You haven't fully prepared yourself. I am aware of that, Naruto thought, but I intended to go covertly and see what has been happening. The villagers ought to have stopped celebrating my death by now, as it has been over a year. Things ought to be getting back to normal. The ideal moment to collect data, he clarified. What kind of information? Kyuubi inquired, intrigued. There must be something that unites them all, and when we find and destroy it, Naruto smiled and said, information about the villagers' collective weakness, of course. With understanding, Kyuubi concluded, we break them. He had a gloomy smile. Kyuubi was so proud of his container that he had to hold back his tears when Naruto revealed his revenge plan. To be honest, he didn't believe he could devise a more cunning scheme on his own. He said, exactly, to which Naruto replied, now let's get going, we have work to do. Before he leapt through the forest, he had a sly smile on his face. Everyone will soon know his name, all his adversaries will shudder soon. The meaning of pain, suffering, and fear will soon be understood by everyone who has crossed him. But more significantly, he would soon be with his beloved angel again. He vowed, once I have finished my plan, those who have wronged me will learn what it is to be my enemy. Ino, my love, soon I will hold you in my arms once more. Konoha. After 2 days, the council members were discussing recent events with one another, and the chamber was bustling with conversation. As Suande Senju walked into the room, the conversation was suddenly cut off. Even though she knew exactly what this was about, she told herself, this had better be good. Now she was not in the mood to tolerate whining. During meetings, she sat down as she usually does, put her hands to her face, and sighed. All right, she said in a disinterested voice, I'm here. What's all this about? It has come to our attention that Aoi Rokusho, a shinobi from a megacure and a missing nin from Konoha, was supposedly killed almost 2 days ago. Is this true? Danzo Shimura asked, standing up despite the Sanin's disrespect, even though he already knew the answer. Yes, it is true, Tsunade replied with a sigh before going on. Even though no body was found, the amount of blood left at the site was the amount that no one could lose and live to tell about it, and the team that discovered the site performed a blood test that confirms it was always. Although the team was successful, they had discovered the battlefield and conducted the blood test after she had sent them to defend one of the competitors in a race that was scheduled to take place there. No, the Raijin was not found at the site of the Aoi's death, only scorch marks, senbon needles, and a destroyed senbon umbrella, Tsunade said, interrupting a civilian member who was about to ask a question. The council member sat down, his expression disappointed. Almost everyone on the council was equally disappointed. Then Sume Inuzuka raised her voice. She blurted out, about fucking time, and expressed the views of many other council members when she said, he should have been killed years ago. Normally quiet, Shibi Aburame said, agreed, Sume-san. Do we know the identity of his killer? He then inquired. Tsunade replied, due to the lack of a body and the large amount of bloodshed on the site, it can only be assumed that the enigmatic entity known only as the demon was responsible, she said. This was not surprising. When the beast attacked, it frequently left behind nothing but a pool of blood and the victim's remains. Since there were no remnants of flesh, bone, or cloth, most people assumed the person had been eaten, but this may not be the case. It also didn't carry them away because there was never a blood trail from the scene of any deaths. The council paused to process this information. Hokage-sama, what will be done in light of this issue? A civilian finally raised his voice. Nothing, was her straightforward response. The elders and civilians started yelling. We cannot let that Thing carry the Nidaim's sword, exclaimed Kaide Haruno, with a number of others echoing her. What do you mean, nothing? She asked incredulously. And what is it you suppose we do? Tsunade asked, glaring at the woman with the pink hair. We should send Hunter Nin to track the demon down, kill it, reclaim the Raijin and Raiga's lightning fangs, and take the demon's body for study. Kaide, said loudly. Danzo, in particular, supported this choice because he wanted to witness the creature's abilities being tested. If it could be captured, it would be a useful addition to his root division. Simply put, Tsunade said, we can't do that. A number of members yelled, why not? Do the words, political shitstorm, mean anything to you? This demon is an ally of Tsunagakure, among others, and if we attack it without provocation they could sever their alliance with us. Tsunade responded by muttering, idiots. As she went on, besides, there is no guarantee that always still had the sword too on him to begin with. He could have sold it to the highest bidder, or he could have given it to AIM when he joined them, so it is entirely possible that the demon never acquired the sword, she concluded with a calmer tone. For a moment, the civilians fell silent. Then Danzo said, Hokage-sama, whether it has the sword or not, we cannot just stand by and do nothing. How long do you think it will take for this creature to become a threat to our village? I think we should place it in the bingo bookin. And do what? Put a price on the creature's head when it has done nothing to harm us in the long term. Suande interrupted, glaring at the elderly war hawk, who sank back into his seat. Besides, she added, you've all heard what it's capable of, and I'm not going to give it a reason to harm anyone in this village. Tsunade then cleared her throat, declaring firmly that, unless it commits a crime against us directly, this demon will not be placed into the bingo book and no hunter nin will be sent after it. Tsunade slammed her fist down on the podium in front of her at the attempt of several council members to argue. The whole room trembled with the impact. The council immediately stopped talking and returned to their seats. Then, with a frustrated tone, Tsunade asked, now that that's settled, is there anything else that needs to be discussed? It has also come to the council's attention that the team that returned from River Country returned with a small boy who has a bloodline capable of neutralizing the Byakugan, among other things, Danzo said, getting to his feet once more before waiting for Tsunade's response. Yes, Suande said, nodding, he was brought back so that I could help heal his disability before deciding what should be done with him. Fortunately, that council has already made that decision, Danzo said with a sly smile. Suande questioned, what do you mean? The elders, including myself, along with the entire civilian council, have agreed to keep the boy within Konoha and then, when he is older, to use him in order to breed an entire clan with his bloodline, he replied confidently. These words infuriated Tsunade, who yelled, what? And, he's just a child, before glaring at the elderly and bystanders. His grin broadened. Be that as it may, we cannot allow a bloodline like this one to fall into another village's hands. The clan heads were disgusted by this, but the elders and civilians firmly agreed. Hiyashi Hyuga was especially opposed to this because he knew Danzo would use it to try to obtain an advantage over the Hyuga clan in the future, even though he was worried that the boy's Kekai Genkai might negate his clan's Byakugan. That is not possible, but Suande tried to interrupt. My apologies, Hokage-sama, but the decision has already been made and is final, Danzo said. The boy will be kept locked up within this village until he is of proper breeding age and he will then be used as breeding stock, the war hawk announced with pride. Tsunade became even more irate over this, but she understood that she had no control over it. She hurriedly ended the meeting and got ready to go to the hospital to treat the disabled boy who the council would use as a mere tool. Konoha Forest. The following day, the prototype, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, was bouncing through the trees at a dizzying rate. He was getting close to his home in Konoha. He made the decision to walk the remaining distance after waiting until he was roughly a mile from the gates before changing his shape to that of an unknown individual. Naruto reflected on how his abilities had changed him over the past year as he ran. His entire being had undergone a massive evolutionary upgrade as a result of his newfound abilities. He had shed all of his baby fat and was taller now, taller than any of his peers. Instead of merely being lines across his face, his whisker marks were now more distinct and had a rough texture. In addition to being slightly longer than before, his hair was even more spiky. Naruto resembled his father almost exactly. As a result of this and his new attire, to the glee of the blonde, Kyuubi had pointed that out. Naruto did not despise his father for what he had done to him, despite how hard it was to accept. At first, he had, but after considering what had transpired and the sacrifice Minato Namikaze had to make to save his village, it appeared that he had little other option. If Naruto had been his father, he believed he would have likely taken the same action in relation to sacrifices. Naruto pondered whether his father would have been so willing to die if he had been aware of the villagers' lack of gratitude. Naruto's relationship with his inner demon has also improved. As you can probably tell, the amount of bloodshed his container was causing thrilled Kyuubi absolutely, and he was more than happy to comply. The beast had evolved into the blonde's obnoxious older brother, bitchy but occasionally helpful. In order to allow Kyuubi to roam freely, Naruto expanded his mindscape and turned it into a huge open field with a forest. Kyuubi's seal was changed from a cage to a collar in return. Kyuubi used a potent genjutsu he had honed over the years to teach his vessel how to show others past events. Demonic Genjutsu. Through the Eyes of the Mind is the title he gave it. Since each vision from this genjutsu was presented from an observational, almost cinematic, point of view, it was almost impossible for anyone to question whether or not the event truly happened. This was helpful, particularly when explaining concepts that are nearly impossible to put into words. Naruto frequently applied this genjutsu to himself in order to review past conflicts and identify areas in which he could become a better version of himself. Kyuubi had also shared a lot of his past with his ship, but he would not say where he came from or why he attacked Konoha. He merely informed Naruto that he had no say in the matter and that it wasn't his intention. The blonde chose to end the conversation, but she intended to ask the Biju again later when they had greater mutual trust. In addition to his physical transformation, Naruto had made significant progress in conquering his more difficult ninja-related challenges. Naruto used to have terrible chakra control, but his body had changed over time, and he was now able to control his chakra flawlessly. He no longer needed much effort to create flawless regular clones. In addition, his former impatience and bravado had given way to composure. He could now control his patience and think more clearly during a fight rather than relying solely on his gut feelings and impromptu tactics. Additionally, Naruto's physical prowess had greatly increased. It was amazing how strong he had become. He was nearly as strong as Tsunade at full strength, and Kyuubi assured him that he was growing stronger with time. He was also more agile, faster, and more resilient without his weights. He was now as fast as Lee, and he could maintain this speed for days at a time thanks to his already improved stamina. He also discovered that he had a kind of dojutsu when activated. This new form of sight enabled Naruto to see the heat of everything, whether it be human or animal, but his eyes stayed the same because of this. He was able to see his prey from a distance, and even through walls. He could also focus in or out of a telescopic-like vision that allowed him to see over great distances. Naruto still struggled to control his newly acquired abilities in spite of his modifications. Willing his limbs to transform into the different weapons he now used required a lot of focus. After roughly 2 weeks of practice, this changed, and now the changes happened naturally with little effort. His arms could currently assume 6 different shapes. The clawed form was the first he had found. His hands were significantly larger thanks to this shape, which also gave each finger a 30 centimeters long claw because of their extreme sharpness. The claws could cut through nearly anything, including steel. Naruto most frequently used this form. He dubbed the second form the hammer fist form. His fists would transform into incredibly powerful mallet-shaped clubs when in use. Any defense would be easily breached by the hammers, which could also produce strong shockwaves that resembled tiny earthquakes. They were only used to break down defenses and produce shockwaves to knock enemies off their feet because they were incredibly heavy and cumbersome. He continued to work on developing a style that would make this form more useful, but he hasn't had much luck thus far. The third form appeared as a gauntlet that threw out a chain that resembled a powerful whip and had a grasping claw at the end. This form could travel incredible distances and had a remarkable reach. Naruto chose the term Whiffist to describe this form. It offered a long-range attack that was risky and unpredictable. In addition to being helpful for grappling objects or people from a distance with its razor-sharp edge, the whip could easily decapitate opponents. Naruto came up with the idea for the fourth form, the gauntlet, spear form. On the spur of the moment, it formed robust defensive armor around the arms and supplied deadly offensive blades. Naruto chose to call it the spear fist, even though it was still a work in progress. The drill fist was his most recent form, which was the fifth. The blonde had taken inspiration for this form from one of the shinobazu, who drilled through almost anything with a clawed gauntlet on his right arm. As the name suggests, the form entailed turning one of his arms into a real drill rather than the missing nin's clawed gauntlet. It took some time, but Naruto eventually managed to get the drill to spin and rotate. He then tested it on Raiga's lightning strike armor, and it worked, killing the man. In addition to piercing the armor, Naruto had not yet discovered the drill's limit because that was the hardest material he had used it against. The shield form was the sixth and last form. The shield form is used for defense rather than offense, in contrast to the earlier forms. As the name implies, the form envelops each arm in an organic, iron-hard shield. Although he had to concede that Raiga had come very close with his fangs of lightning and lightning ball techniques, this shield was dependable and had not yet been broken by any adversary Naruto had encountered. Naruto was certain that the shield wasn't impenetrable even before that specific battle, and he frequently pondered when he would encounter an opponent who could break it. He hoped it would be a long time before that day arrived. Naruto had handled his weapon forms with relative ease. He is still working on it, but he was attempting to create distinct fighting styles for each form. He was initially frightened by Naruto's armored form and consuming power. Naruto nearly passed out the first time he changed into his armored form. When he discovered that this change was voluntary and easily reversible, he became much more at ease. This form's durability pleased him, but he was even more pleased when he learned how much fear it instilled in his enemies. In part because it gave him a formidable appearance and a strong defense, but primarily because he didn't want anyone to see his true form. Naruto was in this form nearly all the time. Even when he was sleeping, his face would soon be all over the elemental nations, serving as a reminder to Konoha that he was still alive, if anyone saw him in his human form and survived to tell the story. He could not afford it and would not put up with it because it would interfere with his revenge plan. But there were some people he trusted enough to let him be himself. As of right now, only Gaara and his siblings, along with his student Matsuri, whom he had saved, are aware of the demons. He hadn't yet developed a new title, true identity. Naruto recalled how they were both shocked and delighted by his unexpected return, and how they were both incensed when he revealed Kakashi's treachery. In addition to offering to sever all connections with Konoha, Gaara had promised to assist his old friend and fellow demon container in gradually tearing the Cyclopean and his priceless pupil apart. These offers were turned down by Naruto, who informed Gaara that he would have to carry out his vengeance alone. However, Suna admitted that it was tempting to sever ties with Konoha and promised Gaara that he would give it some thought. He requested that Matsuri and the Sand siblings keep his survival a secret from everyone, particularly from Konoha. They concurred, and as Naruto departed, they wished him luck on his travels. Recalling how Matsuri gazed at Gaara, Naruto grinned. It made him think of the way he and Ino used to look when they looked into each other's eyes. He hoped that Gaara would eventually be able to find the same happiness he had with Ino with Matsuri, who he could tell genuinely loved the recently appointed Kazekage. Returning to Naruto's new powers, the one he struggled with the most was the capacity to consume the deceased or dying in order to acquire their memories and appearance. When Naruto did this for the first time, he thought he had just eaten the victim and went to his hands and knees, vomiting. He kept his thoughts on pleasant recollections of his past while trying to block out his sorrow. He became aware that he had other memories, different memories, memories that weren't his own. As he was doing this, he noticed that he looked exactly like the man he had just killed when he looked down at the pool of blood from his victim in front of him. Upon searching his memory and mind, he and Kyuubi concluded that the unidentified memories belonged to the man he had eaten. Instead of actually eating the victim, Kyuubi explained, he somehow absorbed him into his own body, gaining his memories, abilities, and skills in addition to his appearance. Naruto continued to eat more of his victims over the course of the following few weeks, and he soon realized how useful this particular skill could be. He could acquire a great deal of combat experience and skill by eating his victims and learning from their memories. This implies that he could acquire a lifetime of experience in a given field by eating people who are exceptionally skilled in that field. When Naruto ate Raiga, for instance, he acquired Raiga's skill with a sword and his command of lightning release, as though he had been the man all along. In other words, Naruto could quickly become an expert in any field, whereas most people would need a lifetime to do so. He also discovered that by doing this, he could recover from any injury nearly immediately and regain chakra. As long as the victim's brain was intact, he could learn everything from them. The blonde considered the different skills and things he had acquired from the people he had eaten. The most notable skills and weapons he has so far acquired include several affinities and techniques related to the release of earth, lightning, water, fire, and wind. The nail techniques he learned from the thief Gosunkugi in Stone Country. The assimilation techniques he learned from one of the wandering ninja group members in Bird Country. The summoning techniques and level of water control. The ninjutsu and ice ninjutsu he had taken from the Janin in Vegetable Country. The weaponry he had appropriated from the four celestial symbols men. The Shin clan sound techniques and the ocarina he had learned from Menma, the name Naruto had given his late friend, the wire, drill, and umbrella techniques he had learned from the Shinobazu, Raiga's jutsu and lightning fangs, and, lastly, the abilities of the Aim Genin and Aoi, as well as the latter's stolen Raijin. Overall, in just over a year, Naruto had gained skills and experience equivalent to several lifetimes. Anyway, let's get back to the ability to consume. Naruto initially struggled to organize the recently acquired memories, but with Kyuubi's assistance, he quickly discovered a method to prevent the memories from taking over his thoughts. However, he still needed to exercise caution because he couldn't quickly devour too many people every 2 or 3 times. The two of them decided to wait at least 5 minutes before continuing. On the subject of Naruto, he had just stopped a mile or so from Konoha when he massacred the camp in Wave. He transformed into a bandit. He had eaten. This form had brown eyes and hair, wore his long hair in a small ponytail, and dressed in ordinary civilian clothes. He had a modest appearance aside from the large scar that was cut across his face. He checked his voice, appearance, and fictitious identification, then left the forest and started down the main path to Konoha. Soon after, he reached the main gates, where two gate guards met him and he presented them with his fake identification. Naruto chose to test their intelligence after they inquired as to why he was here. He informed them that he was an aspiring author who had heard that Konoha had some of the best ramen flavors and was working on a book about the various ramen flavors of the elemental nations. Amazingly, they accepted his story, allowed him to enter the gates without any problems, and advised him to try the best ramen in the village at Ichiraku's. With a suppressed chuckle, Naruto assured them he would remember that. Morons, he thought, surveying the area. If anything, not much had changed. He gave a shrug and went on. After 10 minutes or so, Naruto made the decision to go to the Ichiraku ramen stand, in part because he was hungry and in part because he wanted to see Teuchi and Ayame. Before long, he reached the stand and took a seat while Ayame came toward him with a lovely smile on her face. Naruto could see a sad expression behind it. Teuchi was cooking in the back. With a smile, she said, "Hello sir, welcome to Ichiraku's. What can I get for you?" she asked. He paused to review the menu before responding courteously, "I'd like a bowl of this, Naruto Uzumaki Deluxe Special, that is shown on the menu." He was so flattered that he had to suppress a smile when he noticed that one of the menu items was named after him. After a moment of hesitation, Ayame nodded and vanished into the kitchen. He received his ramen a few minutes later and ate it quickly before saying, "Thank you," and leaving them a 100% tip before they knew how much money he had left them. Naruto hurried off. He kept walking and listening until he noticed a familiar yet despised face approaching him, someone he could hardly stop himself from killing right there. Hitaki Kakashi. He was reading his favorite Icha Icha book while idly strolling through the streets. Naruto chose to ruin the Jonin's day because he knew that the cyclopean idiot always had at least 2 of the novel series with him. He approached Kakashi directly and purposefully ran into him. "That was entirely my fault," Naruto said politely, "and I sincerely apologize, Shinobi-san." The Cyclops said, "Don't worry about it, besides, it was my fault," and then he gave him one of his trademark eye smiles. "I should have watched where I was going," Kakashi said. Then he turned away and walked on. Naruto grinned and continued walking in the same direction. "Yes, you should have, Shinobi-san," he muttered to himself as he studied the cover of an orange novel he was holding. "You really should have," he concluded. Naruto's ability to pickpocket the well-known copy nin shouldn't come as a surprise given that he had to steal and pickpocket for several months after being expelled from an orphanage when he was 5 years old, before he was given an apartment. Naruto and the rest of Fire Country were walking for 10 more minutes when they heard someone yell in agony, "Where's IT? Where's IT?" After chuckling to himself, Naruto continued in case Kakashi could figure out what was going on. He changed into a different identity and walked into an abandoned ally. It turns out that pickpockets operate by bumping into people. He continued to walk for a short while before hearing a disturbance close by. Before he accelerated toward the voice's location, he heard a familiar voice say, "Beat it, Sakura." When he got there, he saw his friends gathered outside the barbecue joint where Ino had told him she and her teammates would congregate following missions. Team 10 and Team 8 were among the group, and they were staring down at a startled Sakura. Sakura had obviously tried to talk to Team 8 and Team 10, who had just come out of the restaurant. Kiba was the source of the voice he heard using a camouflage technique he had learned from another wandering ninja, which also concealed his scent from Kiba and Akamaru. Naruto hid in the shadows of the alleyway he had emerged from. He listened in on the impending argument and wondered why his friends would treat his former teammate so rudely. Sakura said in a startled tone, "Oh come on guys, it's been a year, surely you can't still be mad at me." The last thing Ino said to her old friend was, "What did you expect? That we would just get over it and be glad it happened? We aren't heartless bitches like you." Seeing the girl he loved so much standing close by, regardless of how angry she was or what she was angry about, made Naruto's heart race. Remembering what she had told him more than a year ago, he couldn't help but smile and feel a little turned on when he saw that her hair had returned to its original ponytail. "What? You still have broken free of his control? It must be more serious than I thought," Sakura exclaimed, largely to herself, in shock. "Sakura, we're still here," Choji said. The pinkhead exclaimed. "What does it take before you see the truth?" She began to scream. "When are you all going to wake up and realize that he was nothing but a monster that should have been killed the day he was born?" Startled, Naruto asked, "Is she referring to me?" He reflected to himself. He kept listening. As they glared at her, Kiba and a slightly bigger Akamaru said, "You should leave now, Uchiha whore, before we decide to rip you apart where you stand." The pink-haired girl took a step back, aware that she was outnumbered, as the two teams unleashed a remarkable amount of killing intent. "Fine, if you all want to be under the Kyuubi's control that's fine," Sakura said sourly after a brief period of silence. "And Pig, if you and Hinata want to be demon whores that's also fine," she sighed. "It's a shame that you can't see Sasuke-kun for the hero that he is." Naruto realized now that his old teammate was talking about him. His temper was slowly building. Spitting the final word at her, Hinata yelled, "Sasuke isn't a hero. He's a selfish, spoiled brat, and you're nothing but his worthless bitch." Hinata's yelling of such a hateful remark at Sakura shocked Naruto, who was even more shocked that she did so without faltering. He was so taken aback, in fact, that he momentarily forgot his resentment of Sakura. That she would defend him in any other way did not surprise Naruto. The fact that he had figured out her feelings for him was so obvious that he had already spent about 5 minutes banging his head against a tree and repeatedly muttering the word, "stupid," after he had done so. After giving it some thought, he came to the conclusion that he also cared for her, which clarified why he was so quick to support her during her altercation with Neji and why he vowed to get revenge after her cousin beat her until she was almost dead. He also found it endearing when she stuttered in embarrassment and tapped her index fingers together, but since he was already seeing Ino at the time and didn't want to cheat on her, he didn't act on his feelings. Though this did not and would not alter his feelings for Hinata, he chose not to tell her in the hopes that she would move on and move past him. Sakura screamed back, "Take that back," at the previously bashful Hyuga heiress. Ino questioned, "Why should she? It is true after all." Sakura was spluttering uncontrollably at that last statement, and the others laughed at her. After the pinkette started threatening to kill them, Shikamaru said, "You're in no position to pick a fight with us, Sakura. You should leave, now, before you do something troublesome." Even though Sakura was still furious, she turned and walked away after saying, You'll see how wrong you were and how Naruto being dead is a good thing. Then you'll come crying, begging me to forgive your stupidity and apologizing for insulting Sasuke-kun." Kiba was about to lunge at these words when Shino shook his head and placed a hand on his shoulder reluctantly. Kiba composed himself and accompanied the group out. Right now, they didn't need any more trouble. Meanwhile, Naruto remained enraged. "I did everything for her," he thought. "I defeated Sasuke for her. I helped her defeat Ino-chan's mind switch technique, and I saved her useless hide from Gaara, and this is what I get in return." He started to release a great deal of ki. He still thought highly of Sakura even though he was no longer in love with her, so this betrayal was as shocking and upsetting as the others. "Kid, calm down. You're releasing ki laced with my chakra," Kyuubi immediately interrupted, telling his container. "If you keep this up, the entire village will be able to feel it." After nodding, Naruto gradually started to relax. A few moments later, he had regained his composure. "So, Sakura is just like the others, huh?" He thought then. He thought to himself, "I know exactly how to make her suffer. She will watch Sasuke slowly die before I make her beg for her own death." "That's the spirit, kid," Kyuubi said, nodding and giving his jailer a mental pat on the back. "Just wait until the time is right and then, bam," he concluded, laughing uncontrollably. Naruto also chuckled in his head, thinking, "Yeah, you're right, she'll pay. When the moment is appropriate she will pay," he swore. After that, he kept on strolling around the village, listening for any important information. He was thinking in the meantime when he saw her. Ino had appeared distressed by his passing, and he desperately wanted to reassure her that he was okay. However, he was unable to until he was prepared to exact his revenge. He could not risk disclosing himself to anyone, not even to her. He had to stay hidden until the time came, even though it was painful. "Hey, did you hear about that kid the Uchiha and his team brought back from River Country?" was a whisper that he heard while he was thinking this. One voice whispered, "Yeah, everyone has, what about him?" Naruto found the source of the whisper. Two modest men dressed in shinobi, sitting at a table outside a cafe. He then took a seat on a bench across the street. He concentrated on the private discussion with his improved hearing. The first man stated, "The child has a bloodline that can somehow disable the Byakugan." "Is that even possible?" The second man, still whispering, asked in shock. The initial individual nodded. "It would appear so. The Hokage is going to heal him, and then Danzo-sama and the council are going to use him to breed a new clan when he's older," said him. The second man pondered, "So Danzo-sama will have yet another tool to bring the Leaf Village to glory. Indeed, soon the world will recognize Konoha as the supreme power throughout the elemental nations under Danzo-sama's leadership." The initial said with pride they started eating when a waitress brought their order at that precise moment. Naruto was furious across the street, but he was controlling it. The boy they were talking about was someone he knew. He believed that Renara, the child, would be sent back to the village where Raiga had taken slaves. He ought to have been more aware. Naruto now had to ask himself. Would Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, the prototype, the protector of the defenseless and the killer of the evil, allow these haughty idiots to use a helpless child as a pawn in such a callous manner? Presently, Naruto's thoughts were limited to 3 words: no fucking way. He would not allow anyone to experience this, particularly a child. He refused to let anyone use this boy as a tool for their own purposes, especially Danzo, a man he had always detested. Naruto bided his time until Danzo's men were done, then they stood up and went their separate ways. Naruto waited and followed the person who appeared to be more knowledgeable about the matter. The man emerged in a cloud of smoke as he turned into an alleyway, and he reappeared wearing Enbu gear, with the exception that his mask was entirely black. The kanji for root was printed on his mask and Enbu vest. The man was about to start his patrol when a blade pierced his body and a powerful hand clamped around his mouth. Even with the mask on, the root Enbu's scream of agony was only a muffled gasp because his mouth was covered. When he looked down, he saw what appeared to be a spear emerging from his chest. Then a voice whispered in the man's ear, and he stiffened. A voice from hell, it said playfully, "Tisk, tisk, tisk, you shouldn't have let your guard down," and then it started laughing. A swirl of black and dark red engulfed the root Enbu's entire body and started to draw him in before he could react. The root was in excruciating pain, then he felt nothing at all. Later that evening, outside Konoha's hidden prison. Outside the prison's hidden entrance stood a shinobi guard with a bored sigh. He pulled out a pack of cigarettes. Taking one from the pack, he lit it. He sighed once more after taking a slow drag from it. Before taking another drag from his cigarette and letting it out, he muttered, "Great, just fucking great. Out of all the positions I could have gotten reassigned to, it had to be prison guard duty, and it just had to be on the night shift too," he concluded sarcastically. Abruptly he heard a sound close by and got to his feet. He turned to face where the sound had come from. Suddenly, from behind him, he heard a demonic voice say, "The night shift." The guard turned around and blacked out after being struck in the face by an armored fist. "Huh?" he asked. Within the prison. After knocking out the guard, Naruto swiftly entered the prison in his armored form and started to move through it. Torches were the only source of light in the dimly lit hallways. They were also cramped, so he adhered to the ceiling with his chakra and started to crawl slowly on all fours, freezing whenever guards went by below him. He quickly located a ventilation duct, opened it cautiously, crawled inside, and then closed it again. Then Naruto started to creep through the ducts in silence. Now then, he thought to himself, I have to find out where this kid is before I can release him. He crawled through the tunnels further, thinking, from the look of that drone's memories, this place is huge. He then thought, unless I consume a person who knows every detail of what goes on here, after hearing that it might take hours to find him. However, although it would be ineffective, he couldn't just eat random guards. Then he understood that this location was a prison and that all prisons share a common feature. The warden, he'll have the information I need, he thought, and I just hope he deserves to die. Naruto decided to raid the prison armory after he had been looking for the warden's office for 10 minutes or so. He scanned the area with his thermal vision. He opened the duct and cautiously lowered himself into the room after thinking, good, no guards other than the one outside the door. After surveying the room's contents, he sneered in his head, the security in this prison is shit, and Kyuubi agreed. The vents are huge and easy to sneak through, and they should have placed guards inside the armory as well. He thought, oh well, it's easier for me, he said, smiling as he started to examine the seized goods. Why are you here? Kyuubi asked, perplexed. You are endangering the prison break plan, the beast concluded. Because, he clarified, I'm looking for something that was used against my old team more than a year ago, something that could be helpful soon. In addition, the less they have, the more we gain. Kyuubi nodded in his mind. He searched for a few minutes before finding what he was looking for. He produced two huge gauntlets that resembled claws and contained shuriken chains. The infamous Demon Brothers, Gozu and Maizu, once owned these gauntlets, Naruto thought with a smile. These should be wielded by a real demon, he thought as he opened a scroll and sealed them. That final thought made Kyuubi laugh. After stealing a few more items that had been confiscated, basic shinobi equipment, Naruto silently jumped back into the vent and closed it. A further 15 to 20 minutes of crawling later, Naruto was in the vent directly in front of the warden's office. He silently opened the vent and poked his head out. shaking his head at the folly of whoever had designed this place. The warden was there. Seated at his desk right now, he was reading a well-known orange novel with his feet propped up on his desk. The fact that this man was read smut while he was meant to be working astounded Naruto. After shaking his head, the blonde had a thought. At his desk, Warden Koban was reading his favorite book while occasionally laughing in a perverse way. The demon that killed his wife was dead. He had a high position in Konoha that required little to no actual work, and this year had been fantastic. Everything in the universe was in harmony. He was startled out of his reverie by a soft thud. A tiny orange rectangle was resting on the floor in front of him when he turned around in his chair. Koban stood up and moved toward this oddity. The book was orange. When he saw the title, Icha Icha, the 10th year anniversary edition, his eyes widened. He picked it up, gave it a close inspection, and looked around. He said aloud, "Where did you come from?" His luck was unbelievable. Only 50 of these Icha Ichas are said to have been published worldwide, making them extremely rare. He smiled, opened the book, and laughed at what he read. Koban returned to his desk and asked, "Where have you been all my life?" Even though he loved demons, that toad sage was an absolute genius. A figure dropped out of the vent above where the book was dropped behind the warden, who was too preoccupied with his new book to notice it. The figure was approaching its target in silence. Man, the boys at the bar aren't going to believe T. Something or someone grabbed Koban from behind and put a hand around his throat before he could finish. A demonic voice whispered in his ear, "I can't believe how stupid you are." The book was a trap, and the warden stepped right into it, causing him to panic. He was unable to call for assistance because of the hand around his throat. With what little air he had left, he gasped, "Who are you?" The voice uttered the words, "The last thing you'll never see," before tearing open the warden's throat. Before he could respond to this, he sensed an unseen force drawing him in. Naruto had killed with speed and precision. So swiftly had he killed and devoured the warden that no blood remained. Then, as the memories came flooding back, he closed his eyes. Everything happened in quick bursts, but Naruto grasped it all. He recalled that name, Koban. He had heard the name during one of his frequent childhood beatings, and he recalled that it was used to commend someone for striking him in the leg with a kunai to stop him from running away. Naruto had apparently been correct. This man was deserving of his demise. Before finding what he was looking for, Naruto delved deeper into the deceased man's memories, avoiding the demon-hating nonsense and the deceased wife. Koban waited impatiently at the prison's entrance for the special package they were supposed to get. He could return to reading as soon as they were done with this. The prison's doors opened, and 2 armed guards with a terrified child in tow entered. Not believing it, Koban said, "A kid? A fucking kid? You can't be serious?" "Completely serious. The council wants this little punk locked up tight until ordered otherwise. Is there a problem with that?" said one of the Anbu, threateningly, as he glanced at Koban. "Take it easy," Koban said jokingly, holding up his hands. "There's no problem here," he said, turning to face 2 of the prison guards behind him. "You too," he yelled. The 2 guards rose suddenly. "Take our guest down to D-Wing and lock him up tight. If anything happens to him, I'm taking it out of your asses." The boy was removed from the Anbu by the guards and taken to the D-Wing. After turning off the memory, Naruto turned back to the desk. Before becoming sidetracked, he noticed the book Koban had been reading. With a sly smile, he made the decision to leave a small memento for the person who entered the office. He transformed one of his fingers into a claw and picked up the warden's book. Then he butted it back on the desk after carving a message on the cover. After that, Naruto took the book he had stolen from Kakashi and put it in a secret seal that he kept with all of his trophies. After jumping back into the vent and shutting it, Naruto started to move once more. He quickly located the cell block he was seeking. He opened the vent and started down the cell block, climbing along the ceiling. Renara was eventually located in cell D13. The boy looked awful, covered in filth, and he had the same clothes and hairstyle as when Naruto had last seen him. In a way, he looked as though he had lost a loved one. Naruto had killed Raiga, the person he cared about the most in the world. The boy was shivering and reverent of his surroundings. Naruto quietly fell to the ground in front of Renara's cage, shaking off the thought. The boy saw Naruto drop out of the corner of his eye, but he didn't make a sound, and he was startled to see who it was. The creature that had killed his beloved was there, in all its splendor. Frightened, the 5-year-old boy backed up against the wall and said, "Why you? What are you doing here?" "I'm here to break you out," said Naruto, who was kneeling in front of the cell while still wearing his armor. As he continued to stammer, Renara asked loudly, "Why? Haven't you done enough? You've already taken our Raiga-senpai, my purpose, from me. And now you wish to free me? You wish to further insult me?" "Shush," Naruto said, explaining that he had come to free him due to the plans the village council had for him. Even more perplexed, Renara asked, "What do you mean?" This time without faltering. With a sigh, Naruto explained to the boy what the civilian council, Danzo, and the other elders wanted him to do. But why? The boy asked. Why would someone do something so horrible to a child? Renara was shocked, but this did explain why the Hokage had been so silent and looked so guilty while healing him. Because they are selfish and will do anything in order to gain power, even exploiting an innocent like yourself. Naruto growled before continuing. But I can free you, he continued. I can prevent this from happening. I can give you a home. He stopped and continued. I am sorry I took Raiga from you, but I could not allow him to harm innocents any longer. You say that your purpose was to help Raiga? My purpose is to help the innocent, like you, and, if you wish, you can do that too. I will take you with me and teach you, raise you to do so I can be the family you have always wanted. The choice is yours, Naruto continued. This creature offered to be his family after putting himself in danger to save him from a fate worse than death, which astounded Renara. There was no trace of deceit in his savior's demonic red eyes, according to Renara. Then Renara made a decision. All right, the boy said plainly, adding at the end, I'll accompany you and learn to protect others like you do, senpai. With a smile, Naruto got to his feet and said, all right, then. He grabbed the cell door and said, stand back, I'm going to rip this door open. With a nod, Renara moved back from the door. Then, using his superhuman strength, Naruto tore the cell door from its hinges. The fit hit the shan, sorry, just a term used by one of my college professors. At that point, red lights began to flash brightly and an alarm began to blare loudly. Naruto exclaimed, shit, we have to go now, before grabbing Renara in his arms and running as quickly as he could down the hallway. He noticed guards hurrying to their posts as he was going, curious about what was going on. When he turned left, he saw a group of guards who were startled to see him approach him directly in an attempt to stop him from getting away. Naruto said, hold on, and Renara nodded, tightening his hold on his savior. Before continuing to run, Naruto landed a spinning kick on one guard, right in the face, and jumped off the wall to avoid him. He continued, attempting to dodge the guards that appeared from the paths ahead of him. Even though the guards of this prison had no chance of catching up to him at his current pace, he took care to commit the trail to memory and was fully aware of the way to the exit. He knocked some guards aside and avoided more. He saw over a dozen guards with their weapons raised obstructing his way as he turned the corner that would take him to the exit. Naruto persisted in spite of this. Hang on. This is gonna be bumpy, he said, shifting Renara's body to one of his arms. Renara nodded and prepared himself. Then, holding it out in front of him, Naruto transformed his free arm into a shield. The guards were startled, but they were unable to respond in time. Naruto used his shield as a battering ram and blasted through the guards. Due to their inability to match his strength, guards were sent flying in all directions. It was bumpy. Naruto had been right then, knowing that he had no chance of slipping out with a child in his arms while the village was on high alert. Naruto smashed through the steel exit door he had entered, shifted his arm back to normal, and shifted Renara back into both of his arms before running towards the village gates. The alarms were already going off. Knowing that the Anbu would not employ risky jutsu in the presence of civilians, he made the decision to drive quickly through the town. Then, with agility, Naruto started to make his way through the terrified crowds, a difficult task to accomplish while still wearing armor. He said things like, excuse me, pardon me, coming through, look out, sorry about that, to the terrified and bewildered people who dared to run past and weave through. He kept running without colliding with anyone. Senpai, he uttered loudly enough for his newly dubbed senpai to hear him. There are about 15 masked shinobi approaching us from behind. He told his savior after escaping the cell that had prevented him from using chakra and using his Kekai Genkai to see behind them. They were moving so quickly that the boy was still amazed. Naruto uttered the simple words, Anbu, before yelling, hang on, as progress accelerated. The Anbu that was pursuing them was rapidly losing ground to the pair. They were all thinking, damn, this thing is fast. In the meantime, Ino had just closed the Yamanaka flower shop for the evening and started to head home when she heard yelling behind her. When she turned around, she saw a big figure running directly at her while carrying something in its arms, followed by a number of smaller figures. Ino prepared for the figure to crash into her because she knew she wouldn't be able to move out of the way in time. However, this did not occur. Instead, the figure jumped over her and flipped in midair. As Ino looked up at whatever it was that leapt over her and the young boy it was carrying, time seemed to slow down. It gazed into her eyes, and she also noticed that the young boy was saying, sorry, With his mouth after that, time returned to its usual tempo as the creature landed behind her, rolling to lessen the impact before running on without even slowing down. The Anbu that was pursuing it also blew straight past her a few seconds later. To put it mildly, Ino was perplexed and kept staring after them as they vanished into the distance. All Ino Yamanaka could think was, what the fuck just happened? Up until now, she was unaware that the alarms were going off. The armored teenager, back with Naruto, could see the village gates in front of him. "Hold on, boy," he exclaimed, "we're almost there." At that moment, the village gates were closing behind them, and over 24 Anbu were blocking their path this time. Naruto would be powerless to stop them. He yelled, "Shit!" Believing there was no escape all the while, he continued to run. In that same moment, he thought, "I need a way out of this." However, he felt demonic chakra pass through his mouth as he yelled. There were visible sound waves coming from his scream of rage, which sounded like a banshee wailing. The crowded Anbu was hurled backwards by the force of the sound waves. The now shocked blonde Jinchuiki hurried through the stunned and dispersed Anbu as the gates closed, thinking, "Okay, that wasn't what I had in mind, but it'll do." Until he was certain they were safe, he ran a few more miles. Then he looked back and skidded to a stop. "Are we safe now, senpai?" the boy asked as Renara glanced up at him. The words, "Yep, we made it," were spoken triumphantly by Naruto, who grinned down at him. Renara grinned and then fainted. Naruto chuckled. Both of them had had a long day, and the 5-year-old boy had suffered as a result. Naruto inhaled deeply before moving on, searching for a remote area in the forest where they could camp and spend the night, mentally noting that he would later ask Kyuubi what that blast he had created was. Council chamber in Konoha. The following morning. The council was in a frenzy, as usual. Why? Because last night, the notorious demon helped the boy they planned to use as breeding stock escape. "Will you all just shut up?" Tsunade yelled at the startled council as she slammed her fists into her podium. Before a civilian stood up and said, "Hokage-sama, we must send Hunter Nin after the beast. We cannot let this monster steal what rightfully belongs to this village." The council quickly fell silent. Several other people agreed. This proved to be a really bad word choice. The man drew back into his chair as Tsunade glared at him. "Belongs? You speak of the boy as if he were property," she yelled at him. The old war hawk concluded by obtaining consent from the other elders and civilians. "What matters is that the child be retrieved and brought back to the village, and the demon be killed, or better yet, captured, for study," Danzo said. Danzo was more irate than normal because his latest pawn in his scheme to depose Tsunade had escaped the village after one of his roots went missing. Could things get any worse for him today? Shikaku Nara sighed in frustration after realizing he had captured everyone's attention. This demon broke into a maximum security prison, apparently killed the warden without leaving any trace behind, smashed its way through the prison guards, outran our top Anbu, and escaped the village, all while carrying a small child in its arms. And you want to send Hunter Nin after it? It scattered almost 30 Anbu with a single attack. We have no idea what else this thing is capable of, and sending Hunter Nin after it could get them killed, he said simply before reclining in his chair and listening to the other clan heads concur. They shuddered at the part about the warden. Some of the guards went to his office after everyone had calmed down, wondering why he hadn't given orders over the intercom during the prison break. They found nothing. When they walked into his office, they saw that the cover of the orange book on the desk had a message carved into it. "He'll never see again," but it didn't make him blind. Unusual words, indeed. Kaharu continued, "It still makes no sense. Why would this thing break the boy out of prison after it killed his sensei?" she inquired. "If it wanted to kill him, it would have done so inside the prison." The council members pondered for a while but couldn't think of anything. "Whatever its reasons may be, it has still committed crimes against our village and should be placed in the bingo book at the very least," Danzo said after clearing his throat, gaining the support of the other council members. Tsunade murmured, "Fine." She grumbled, "The demon will be placed into the bingo book as an A-ranked nin with a capture on sight order on its head, but there will be no Hunter Nin sent after it until we have a better understanding of its abilities," she concluded. "I've already sent my route to capture the beast, so they should be reporting back soon enough," Danzo thought, mentally planning. "Now then," Tsunade said, clearing her throat once more, "we also need to talk about the inmates who got away during last night's confusion." The council was taken aback by this development. It wasn't until this morning that anyone realized this fact. "Who are the escapees?" inquired Inoichi Yamanaka following a brief period of silence. "The traitor Mizuki along with Fujin and Reijin, the legendary stupid brothers," replied Tsunade. The council's shock was even greater. A former Orochimaru subordinate and a pair of strength matched, if not superior to, the Godem Hokage. This wasn't good. Homura raised his voice and inquired, what is to be done about this? 2 teams are to be sent after them later this afternoon with the goal of bringing them back alive, replied Suande. This appeared to be accepted by the council. On that note, Tsunade thanked them for Renara's escape and dismissed them. An hour later, inside a cave miles outside of Konoha. After a brief period of awakening, Naruto, in his human form, was observing a sleeping Renara. Kyuubi had informed him during the night that the energy blast he had used against the Anbu the previous evening was known as the Sonic Scream attack. Before being sealed, Kyuubi himself had employed this attack numerous times. Demon chakra was compressed into audible sound waves and then launched from the user's mouth toward the target or targets. Although it is deafening, the scream can actually suck the life out of whoever it is directed at if enough demonic chakra is used. Think of the Silver Banshee's cry from Justice League Unlimited. At full power, Kyuubi said, it could crush a whole village somehow. While he was angry, Naruto had triggered this power, which allowed him to momentarily access the demonic chakra. When Naruto found out he had this new power, he was overjoyed. He was considering the possibilities when he saw Renara starting to awaken. After a moment of searching, the boy noticed Naruto in his human form. When he saw this stranger, he became alarmed and retreated. Calm yourself, child, it is I, your senpai, Naruto exclaimed with a smile. Confused, Renara said, but you. He was interrupted by Naruto, who said, what you saw before was my armored appearance that I used to disguise myself. He changed into his armored form and then back again to emphasize his point. Once he had recovered from his shock, Renara nodded and muttered, I see. Do not worry, Renara. I will not hurt you and I will fulfill my promise to raise and train you, Naruto said with a laugh. After remembering, he cleared his throat and exclaimed, my name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, but others will soon know me as the prototype. I haven't introduced myself yet, have I? He asked. Uncertain that he was correct, Renara gazed at his senpai. Then Naruto became serious, telling his student, I hope you will be able to keep this secret. My identity is one of my greatest secrets. If my enemies were to discover it, all that I care for would be placed in peril, he concluded. With a nod, Renara promised, I will, senpai. Naruto grinned. He said, good, and approached Renara. Sensing something outside the cave, he interrupted, now then, glancing at Renara, judging from the way you move, it will be quite some time before you can move your limbs properly, so until then we'll focus on your recovery. And then, senpai? He asked anxiously, then peered outside the cave using his bloodline. There are 5 shinobi outside of the cave wearing black masks and have a kanji for root on their uniforms. He stated to Naruto, they know we are here and appear to be waiting for us to come out. I think they wish to speak with you, the child concluded. Renara nodded and watched as Naruto's savior changed into his armored form and started walking toward the cave entrance. Naruto nodded and said, wait here until I return. The 5 root Anbu, meanwhile, waited tensely outside the cave for the beast inside to come out. The root squad leader reminded his men, remember not to attack it until it gives us its answer. We need to make sure this thing is sentient before we give it Danzo-sama's offer. Attack only if it attacks us or it refuses, and remember to capture it alive, he added, receiving nods from the other members of the group. Then, as loud stomping sounds approached the cave entrance, they felt the ground tremble a little. Naruto is purposefully making his steps audible in order to intimidate the root members. The stomping grew louder gradually as the beast approached. After several excruciatingly tense moments, the demon finally appeared. This thing must have been at least 7 feet tall, but the root's shock was concealed by their masks. It was, as described, completely covered in black armor-like skin, with broad shoulders, a fox-like tail, razor-sharp teeth and claws, blood-red eyes, and a head and ears like a fox. Right now, it was stooped a little, trying to look more beastly to further intimidate them. For a few moments, the beast shifted its eerie gaze between each of the group members and glared at them. It was obviously upset that they were bothering it. The root leader cleared his throat and said to the beast, we are here to speak with you under peaceful terms. After he had composed himself, then the demon glared at him intently. Do you understand me? The root asked after taking a big gulp. The demon briefly cocked its head to the side before raising it back into position. The beast gave a nod. Are you the entity known as the demon? The leader asked, letting out an inward sigh of relief. It amused the disguised Naruto that the root had to inquire. Yes, he said, but I'd rather be known as the prototype. The squad was momentarily startled by the monster's demonic voice before they collected themselves in an effort to be more courteous. The leader spoke again, saying, "Very well," before going on to say, "We have come to deliver a proposition that you might be interested in, Prototype-san." Although he was curious about the name the beast gave itself, he chose not to inquire. Then he awaited the demon's answer. For a moment, the newly named Prototype examined every individual in the group. Naruto chose to listen to them even though he knew he would reject whatever they were offering him. He folded his arms across his muscular chest and straightened. "I'm paying attention," he informed them. Before the leader went on, the roots collectively exhaled in relief. "Our leader, Danzo Shimura, wishes to offer you a place in his root division, a group he indicated with his squad and himself, are a part of, and help in his plans to. If you agree, you'll learn more." "Interesting," the Prototype said after giving it some thought. "And what, if anything, would I gain from joining this?" "What was his name again?" he asked, playing dumb to demonstrate how committed these fanatics were. "A man who is a high-ranking member of our village's council and a man who will soon change the world as we know it," the root informed him, getting a little irritated. "And he can offer you power beyond your wildest imagination, and you will be given a place in the new world he will bring," he concluded in a tone reminiscent of a man discussing his god. With a non-believing voice, the Prototype raised one of his absent eyebrows and said, "Change the world? How? How can any one man change the world, let alone rule it?" As the root grew irate, he responded angrily, "If you join us, you will see. Now, do you accept or not?" he asked. The Prototype paused to pretend to think, then he moved a little closer to them. The members of Root retreated and grabbed their weapons. The Prototype then sniffed the surrounding air. After a moment, he took a step back and turned to face the squad. "You all smell of sniff, treachery, deep sniff. Your leader plans on betraying me and making me into a mindless tool, like all of you too," he said confidently. "Thanks for the offer, but I know an empty promise when I hear one, and besides, power beyond my wildest imagination," he sneered. "I already have that and can gain more from the various wicked people I kill." Choosing to test their patience, he continued to provoke them, saying, I wonder if this Danzo has anything I could gain by killing him, are you?" The root squad was furious now as he and his teammates took their weapons out of their sheaths. The leader yelled, "You dare insult and then threaten Danzo-sama, the man who is making you an offer that only comes once in 1,000 lifetimes." After accusing them of speaking as though he were a god, the Prototype laughed ferociously and went on to laugh. "I already know who your master is," he said with a sigh, "to tell you the honest truth, as there can be no other." The root stopped. "I only pretended not to because I wanted to know just how deluded you all really were," he stated with a grin. "I've always despised the crippled old freak, and my disgust towards him grew after the things I learned from your fellow root member yesterday when I killed him. Tenma, was it?" The leader said. "Why you killed him?" As the root were in disbelief, an entire squad was dispatched to locate Tenma after he failed to return yesterday. Most likely, the group was still searching. "Correct. And boy, did he share such secrets with me, secrets that are now mine to know." Itano 3, the Prototype said, nodding and smiling, adding the root leader's name that Danzo had given him at the end. As he stepped back, the root leader's eyes widened behind his mask. How?" he asked, wondering how this monster had managed to get Tenma to share his knowledge with it without breaking the seal that was placed at the back of each root member's throat. Each member was shielded from disclosing the division's secrets by the seal. He was interrupted by the Prototype. "Oh, that poor little drone taught me a lot," he said to the group before smiling and sharing his newfound knowledge with the stunned root operatives. Root's underground training facility, Danzo's plan to become Hokage, even his involvement with Hanzo of the Salamander, and Root's involvement with him to help quell an uprising in a Megacure, a mission that failed exponentially, I might add, he said. The members of Root were horrified and shocked. Some of Root's most important secrets had been discovered by this thing, secrets that, if discovered, would bring down the organization. Itano, the man, said in a terrified voice, but how? We all have S seals that prevent us from telling anyone anything. And here I thought that all Root were trained to suppress their emotions. Guess that lesson never took," he said, laughing a little more before he sighed. "The answer to your question is simple really," he explained, "because the seal is only effective while the person is still alive. When they die, however, the seal disappears and then their secrets become mine." Trying to conceal the fear he and his friends had been taught to repress, Itano questioned, "But how do you learn something from someone who's dead? You know those bodies of the people I kill that never turn up. The victims who only leave a shitload of blood behind?" The Prototype asked them, smiling. He goes on after they nod. He told them, well, those people die in a different way, and then he briefly showed them a genjutsu in which he killed and consumed a victim. When I do that to a person I gain that person's memories and skills, he said, before transforming into Tenma's form. To the surprise of the Root Squad, he continued in Tenma's voice, I also gain their appearance as well. With this power, I can gain a lifetime's worth of experience in an instant. I literally become the person I absorb into myself, he said, pausing to allow the information to sink in, and then changing back into his armored body. And once I consume you, he said, pointing to Itano, I will learn everything you know and I will kill Danzo using your memories, so that, in a way, you will be responsible for his death. Oh, that's right, Itano, it'll be all your fault, he said to the man, saying each word separately to allow them to sink in. Then Itano and his fellow Roots went crazy, yelling, die. As they charged the prototype, totally disregarding their orders, let's party. The prototype yelled as he charged at them, grinning and transforming his arms into clawed shapes. After 5 minutes and a few girly screams. After watching the battle with his bloodline, Renara was astounded by how quickly and easily his senpai had defeated the 5 Anbu-level ninja after playing with them. After dusting off his trench coat, Naruto entered the cave in his human form a few seconds later. Too easy, he grumbled, then turned to face Renara's dazzling red eyes before the boy turned them off. The boy had witnessed the entire fight. Naruto realized he took a seat in front of the boy. He sincerely said to the 5-year-old boy, I'm sorry you had to see that child. You did what had to be done, Renara told his mentor, shaking his head, it's okay, senpai. Good boy, Naruto said with a smile and a playful ruffle of the boy's hair. He sat back and said, now then, he asked his student, I bet you wish to know about the abilities I used out there. Naruto started telling Renara about his background and skills after he gave him an enthusiastic nod. Although Renara was horrified that someone could be so cruel to someone so nice, he discovered that his senpai's history and his own were very similar in that they were both rejected because of something they were powerless to change. A few hours later, Naruto had completed his story when he unexpectedly came across an Itano memory that he felt he ought to investigate. As he stood up, he said to Renara, okay, my student, I just discovered a memory I need to investigate. Sit tight, I'll be back in a bit. Renara started to object, asking, where are you going? To see an old friend, the blonde replied. With hope, Renara asked, can I come with you? He looked into his sad student's face and said, no. Naruto told him firmly, you're still recovering and I don't want you to get hurt in case I become reckless. Don't worry, he told the boy. I'm going to leave a group of shadow clones behind to guard you and you can talk to them as if they were me. He noticed that Renara was still upset, so he said, come on, don't give me that face. I'll be back in a little while and then I can start teaching you. I'll make it up to you soon, I promise. At that thought, Renara brightened and grinned, saying, okay senpai, with eagerness. Naruto gave him a smile and said, good, before stooping to rub the boy's hair once more. After making 3 shadow clones, he said, I'll be back soon, and walked away. Naruto changed into his armored form once he was outside and started to jump through the trees. With an evil smile, he thought, Mizuki, you should have remained in prison. I let you live once, but I won't be kind to you again. You previously believed me to be a demon. As he ran through the trees, thinking of all the ways he could finally kill the traitorous fool, he thought, wait till you see what I am now. 2 hours prior, Konoha, the Hokage's office. Standing before the Godime Hokage, Suon Senju, with her assistant Shizune holding Taunton at her side, Team 10 minus Asuma and the remnants of Team 7 awaited their orders. As you may already know, 3 convicts escaped from the village's prison during the confusion last night, Tsunade informed the 2 teams after clearing her throat. Mizuki and the legendary Stupid Brothers, right? Kakashi asked, raising his voice. You have a mission to find and apprehend them alive, Tsunade informed him, glancing at Sasuke. Will we be escorting them back to prison? Shikamaru raised his voice. No, you will only have to subdue them. The Anbu will take care of the actual prison escort, Tsunade said, shaking her head. Speaking up, Sakura questioned, Mizuki. As in Mizuki-sensei, our old academy instructor. Tsunade gave a nod. The Pinkett questioned, perplexed, why was he in prison? As is rarely the case, Mizuki's arrest was never made public. At any rate, the Konoha ones. More than a year ago, he tricked Naruto Uzumaki into stealing the Forbidden Scroll in an attempt to acquire it for Orochimaru. She informed them this caused the genin to widen their eyes. Typical, sneered Sasuke, the loser fell for such an obvious trick. Watch your tone, Uchiha, or I'll personally make sure you do nothing but D-rank missions for the next 5 years, Suon said, giving him a fierce look. Sakura opened her mouth to defend him, but the Godime Hokage glared at her to stop her. She cleared her throat and said, as I was saying, Mizuki tricked Naruto into stealing the scroll and was confronted by Naruto and Iruka Yumino. She added, Mizuki incapacitated Iruka, and was defeated by Naruto soon afterward. To Sakura's surprise and Sasuke's rage, she mentally smiled as she concluded. The dead last had defeated a Chunin-level shinobi before even graduating, which shocked Sakura. Meanwhile, Sasuke was upset that one of the academy's teachers, Mizuki, had been beaten by the Dobi. He relaxed and smiled, promising to defeat and capture Mizuki and demonstrate his superiority over Naruto once more. In the meantime, Ino was beaming, pleased with the actions of her deceased boyfriend. Choji inquired, who are the legendary Stupid Brothers? They were a pair of shinobi brothers who killed their own comrades for food, Kakashi informed him. Choji's eyes widened. Even he wasn't that in need of food. Their strength is matched only by their stupidity, hence their name, Kakashi informed the astonished group, adding, and apparently the only reason they haven't broken out of prison until now is because of the food the guards gave them. You all have your orders, depart the village within the hour, Tsunade said, clearing her throat. After giving a nod, they departed. With a sigh, Tsunade put her head in her hands. Concerned, Shizune turned to face her mentor and said, Tsunade-sama. Are you all right? I'm fine, Shizune, she said to her student, trying to say, I. You still miss him, Shizune concluded for her teacher after understanding. Tsunade avoided discussing Naruto as much as possible because he was always a sensitive topic in her presence. She had drowned her sorrows in sake more than usual, anyway. During the first month following his death, she stopped drinking almost completely. She still needed alcohol to cope with the council's bitching, and stopped gambling completely after she woke up from her depressed stupor. Then, in the memory of her surrogate son, she swore to remain Hokage and transform the village. The only item she had left to remind her of Naruto was the necklace she had given him, which she wore once more. Additionally, she was quick to use violence against anyone who made fun of the late blonde. This mostly involved the offenders going to the hospital, but after a particular incident, that changed. Tsunade's Anbu guard had the audacity to mutter that he was relieved the demon brat was no longer there and hoped he was in hell. To another Anbu, he whispered this. Luckily, this Anbu had no special animosity toward Naruto and discreetly warned his friend to keep quiet in case the Hokage overheard, but the offending Anbu was positive she didn't hear him. He was mistaken. The poor guy didn't anticipate the blow. The man's head splattered everywhere rather than being thrown back by the force of the punch. Like a watermelon falling from the top of the Hokage tower, his head broke apart. Nobody ever spoke negatively about Naruto around the slug Sannin again after that. Hell, some were scared to think anything bad about her at all. Tsunade nodded and said, Damn Gaki, he was like a son to me, as a tiny tear welled up in her eye and she let out a little sob. I'm fine, Shizune, I'm fine, she told her student after placing a hand on her mentor's shoulder, who quickly shrugged it off. I just need to think positively. Like, she thought for a moment before brightening up and exclaiming, maybe Mizuki will kill Pinky and the Uchiha during the mission. With a very positive expression on her face. After a moment of shock, Shizune yelled, Tsunade-sama. In a tone akin to a parent reprimanding a child and gesturing to her. She could hardly hold back her own laughter. She eventually stopped crying. For a while, they both laughed, relieved to have a momentary diversion from their suffering. Current conditions in the forest outside of Konoha. The prototype, also known as Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, was soaring through the trees in pursuit of an old friend he wished to murder. Terribly, in his mind, he said, now, where is the old punching bag? Mizuki, what tiny hiding place are you using? He paused, turned on his thermal vision, and took a look around, wondering. Within a short time, he noticed something. 5 people were visible to him at a considerable distance. He at least believed they were human. 2 of them were enormous, while the other 3 were sufficiently mediocre in size. They appeared to be twice as wide and at least as big as him when he was armored. Right now, their movements appeared to be impeded. With a steady pace, he leapt through the trees toward the scene. Battleground nearby. The legendary Stupid Brothers versus Team 10. At the moment, Team 10 was engaged in a fierce conflict with the incredibly powerful Stupid Brothers. At first, the 2 hardly gave the trio any attention until Ino and Choji unintentionally ruined the siblings' lunch, which sent them into a violent rage. Shikamaru's shadow imitation technique had so far prevented the two brothers from moving, and the shadow neck bind technique was currently strangling Raijin. Unfortunately, though, the Nara clan heir was finding it hard to keep up the technique due to the brothers' physical strength. Confused by the gargling sounds Raijin was making while being strangled, Fujin was able to raise one arm and start shaking his younger brother in an attempt to wake him up. "Brother, what's wrong with you?" Fujin yelled in an incoherent tone while giving his younger brother a hard shake. Unbeknownst to Fujin, Shikamaru, who was already struggling to maintain his techniques, was being further taxed by his shaking of Raijin. "I can't keep this up much longer," he yelled to his blonde teammate, grunting at the end due to the strain. "Got it." Ino made her family's heart-shaped hand sign and exclaimed, "Mind-body disturbance technique." After nodding, she told him. After a moment of inaction, Raijin turned to look at Fujin, then, causing Fujin to gasp in agony, he punched his older brother in the stomach before striking him in the face. Raijin wrapped his big, strong hands around his brother's throat and started strangling him before Fujin could get better. Ino grinned. Her clan's jutsu was effective, and even better, Raijin was still being strangled by the shadow neck bind, which kept him from speaking the final outcome. Fujin believes that Raijin has deceived him. They were unable to accuse or defend their actions because neither brother was able to speak at the time. The two brothers continued to dominate Team 10 in spite of this new tactic. Seeing his teammates in danger, Choji got his clan's technique ready. He exclaims, "Partial multi-size technique." His arms both grow enormously, then, using his own increased strength, Choji grabbed both brothers in each hand and started to crush them as tightly as he could. The three Chunin, Choji and Ino, passed the exams earlier in the year. Standing close by were the cause of the two foolish brothers' discomfort. Even though they were now completely perplexed by what was happening, they started to fight for their freedom more vigorously than before. Before long, Team 10 was struggling to contain the two. Shikamaru grunted under the strain of holding the two and told his teammates, "It's no use, we can't hold them forever." With another grunt, Ino questioned, "Then what do we do?" "Start flaring your chakra," Shikamaru said after giving it some thought. "Hopefully backup will arrive before they break free," he concluded. Together with their teammate, the other two nodded and started to flash their chakra in an attempt to get help from nearby shinobi. However, nobody showed up. The Neo-Ino Shika Cho at last. The brothers were forced to abandon their clan techniques because the formation could no longer contain them. When they were released, Fujin and Raijin charged the three without a word, forgetting their earlier situation in which they had been forced to attack one another. Shikamaru and Choji were swatted away by Raijin after being flung into the surrounding trees. The two were rendered unconscious. Ino was similarly treated by Fujin, but she was able to stay conscious. Fujin declared, "Now you will pay for ruining our lunch." The older of the two siblings raised his arm, ready to strike Ino once more. Ino was aware that she was too hurt and tired to make a quick escape. The devastating blow was something she prepared for. However, nothing appeared. Ino finally made the decision to open her eyes and see what had transpired. What she saw startled her. A huge, demonic creature was standing in front of her. It was nearly identical in size to the two brothers. It had broad shoulders, a fox-like tail, and a big, muscular body. Ino was unable to see its face, but based on the description, she was certain that the object in front of her was the notorious demon she had heard so much about and had seen the night before. The fact that this, whatever it was, had Fujin's fists clenched in both of its own made the blonde genin even more shocked. Fujin had punched the creature. The strain of holding back the punch caused the prototype to grunt as it stood before the stunned stupid brother. "Goddamn." As he kept pushing, he told himself, "It's like catching and holding back cannon fire." He pondered. He was aware that these two would be powerful, but not to this extent. Although he couldn't identify the creature in front of him, Fujin knew it was preventing him from exacting revenge for his lunch being destroyed. Raising his other fist, he hurled it at the demonic creature before him. Shit. As the punch was about to be delivered, the prototype thought, "I can't stop it with only one arm." Still, he moved one arm out of instinct and raised it to take the blow. Then, an unexpected event occurred. When the prototype's arms or body changed shape, the same pulsating black and dark red substance covered both of his arms. However, they transformed into something he had never seen before this time. Both hands and arms grew significantly larger and became gray. To the further surprise of the prototypes, he easily took Fujin's punch with his enlarged fist. It dawned on him then that his other fist was easily containing the brother's other fist. This form, whatever it was, appeared to significantly increase his strength. The bottle's tide had now shifted. The prototype then threw the second fist aside and smashed his upgraded fist into Fujin's face with the same arm. The prototype's other fist, which was still gripping his other arm, prevented the brother from being thrown flying back by the tremendous force of the blow. The prototype then delivered an uppercut to the brother's chin after punching Fujin in the stomach. A huge crater was created when Fujin flew straight up and struck the ground with force. Raijin was startled and terrified because no one had ever been as strong as the two brothers, much less outmatched them. With one hand clutching his stomach and the other rubbing his chin, Fujin stood up and looked fearfully at the prototype. Raijin pointed to the beast a few feet away and said, Who are you?" The prototype glared at the two and yelled, I am your worst nightmare." Saying the final word with extra venom, he pointed at them and said, "And you too, will not lay a hand on my angel." He concluded, growling at them with a sound that promised them a painful death. Still conscious, Ino was taken aback by her monstrous savior's words. "Angel, no one has ever called me that except," she thought, and then she understood. "No," she said incredulously, "could it be him?" She pondered. The being in front of them, meanwhile, frightened the legendary stupid brothers. They were terrified of what it could, and most likely would, do to them, but they had no idea what they had done to enrage it. The two enormous siblings were on the ground, kneeling before the beast in front of them, and bowing in a split second. Fujin yelled, "We're sorry," in a terrified tone. With equal fear, Raijin pleaded, "Please don't hurt us." At this sight, the prototype couldn't help but perspire. After just a few blows to one of them, two of the physically strongest shinobi in the world were pleading for pity. Ino also broke down in tears at the sight, still reeling from the shock of a potential revelation. Were she and her teammates going to be killed by these two? How pitiful, she reflected. For a short while, the two brothers kept groveling at the prototype's feet. At last, the irritated prototype rolled his eyes and said something. All right, I'll spare you," he said to the two idiots. They weren't even worth killing because they were so pathetic. The brothers' eyes were bright with hope as they gazed up at him. "If," the prototype went on in a solemn tone, making the siblings' optimism falter a little, "you both return to prison immediately," he concluded. The two brothers were about to respond when the beast in front of them went on, "And if you don't hurry up," he told them, pausing at the end to say, "you won't receive any dinner," before grinning savagely. The brothers' faces were filled with fear as they froze. They were appalled at the idea of skipping any kind of meal. Guy or Lee would have been envious of the two as they leapt to their feet and began running toward the prison. "A smart choice, in fact," the prototype remarked when he turned to face Ino. After readjusting his arms, he discovered that she was still conscious. He questioned her unsurely, "Oh, hi, how long have you been listening?" Despite her initial fear of this, Ino gave him a straightforward and honest response, telling him, "Pretty much since you showed up." "Oh, did you happen to hear a certain something I said a little while ago after I punched the glutton in the face?" asked the man, keeping his fingers crossed. He hoped she wouldn't be able to piece it together. Sadly, she did. She asked, "You mean the part where you called me, Angel?" "Yeah, I did," she said matter-of-factly. Seeing the realization in her eyes, the prototype remained silent. There was silence for a moment, and then Ino fought her way to her feet. She stepped forward a few paces. He retreated a few paces, met his evil eyes, and uttered a single word in a whisper. Recalling that Naruto's body was never truly recovered, she asked in a hopeful tone, "Naruto-kun. Was he here? Is he here?" Could it be that the man she loved so much was this being in front of her? Was the person she truly loved still alive, standing a few feet away? The beast's blood-red eyes showed a look of deep heartache, but it remained silent. After a few seconds, the prototype finally uttered a single word in a whisper. "Angel," was the word he spoke in a voice full of pain and longing. A groan sounded close by. Before Ino could reply, she looked back to see her teammates rising. Shikamaru whispered the word, "troublesome," to herself. Choji rubbed the back of his head and moaned, "Ino?" he asked, looking up at his teammate, "What happened?" When Ino turned to see where the prototype had disappeared, she was about to reply, "I." As he and Choji looked around and then at their blonde teammate expectantly, waiting for an answer, Shikamaru asked, "Ino, what's wrong?" And then he realized something. "Wait, where did the stupid brothers go? And how are we still alive?" he asked. Meanwhile, the heir of the Yamanaka clan was gazing at the location where her savior had once been. The fact that she received no response upset her. "What happened?" Choji repeated, "Ino." After giving it some thought, Ino made the decision to be honest with her teammates, excluding the possibility that Naruto was still alive. Her voice was odd as she whispered, "That thing saved me." Shikamaru asked her, "What thing?" As her teammates were perplexed. Ino swallowed. The demon," was her low-pitched response. "The demon?" Shikamaru asked, gaining a nod from Ino, as the two boys' eyes widened, as in, the demon that has been cited throughout the elemental nations. The demon that killed Raiga Kurosaki. The demon that stormed through our village last night. That demon. What happened? Choji asked, worried, as the two were taken aback. That big guy was about to punch me 1 second, and then the demon caught the punch and beat the shit out of the guy. Ino told them candidly, "I'm not sure." Still in awe but with a worried tone, Shikamaru inquired, "What happened next?" The two got really scared and begged it not to hurt them. She informed them. It said it wouldn't hurt them if they returned to prison. The two ran off. It stared at me for a moment, and then it left, she said. The blonde left her teammates in disbelief. Shikamaru asked, "Did anything else happen?" "Troublesome. Let's head back and tell Kakashi-sensei what happened," he said to the others after Ino shook her head. They were just about to depart when the Cyclops and his entourage showed up. He turned to Team 10 after witnessing the destruction. Kakashi questioned, "Did we miss something?" Everyone started to perspire. Minutes later, inside a nearby secret hideout. At the moment, Mizuki was on the top floor of an abandoned hideout, anxiously waiting for the two stupid brothers. Since his last experience outside of prison, Mizuki had not changed much. He was much more muscular than before, but that was the only change in him. You didn't stay in prison long unless you were strong enough to handle the other inmates, so this was more a matter of necessity than anything else. Additionally, he's a little happier these days. He had intended to break out to exact revenge on the demon brat for degrading him and imprisoning him after learning of Naruto Uzumaki's passing a few months prior. Of course, he broke out only to get away. Now that that opportunity had been snuffed out, Iruka wasn't worth it, but he could have pursued him. Mizuki said impatiently, "Where the hell are they? They should have been here by now." He said in an irritated tone he would have to leave without them if they didn't act quickly. He couldn't wait for Konoha shinobi to pursue him, but he also didn't want to travel to Otogakure without support to help deal with any hunter nin that might follow him. Suddenly he heard the room reverberate with a demonic voice. It informed Mizuki that, "Your flunkies have abandoned you." Mizuki glanced about the room, a little scared of what was going on. He searched and said, "Who's there? Show yourself," he insisted. The voice called back, "Up here." Mizuki saw what appeared to be a demon from the depths of hell. When she looked up, it was leaning against one of the support columns. Hunched over, it was staring at Mizuki with an open mouth and a demon smile. Then, with its eyes still fixed on him, it swiveled its head to the right and snapped its jaw shut with a sound, its smile growing even wider and its appearance even more ominous. Stunned, Mizuki said nervously, "Who, or what the hell are you?" He informed the startled missing nin that he was known by some as the demon, but that's too simple for my tastes, so you may call me the prototype, he exclaimed with pride. Chunin, who had silver hair, gazed at the object before him. "What do you want?" Mizuki asked after a few tense moments. "A lifetime supply of ramen, to be with the people I care about and, oh yes, your life," the prototype told the treacherous Chunin, wearing a menacing grin, as if he had taken a moment to reflect. Mizuki began to perspire inwardly. "What? Why?" he questioned the beast, his voice barely concealing the fear. "What did I ever do to you?" he asked. "What the devil is this?" He reflected to himself. It was nearly twice as big as him. "Oh, we met a long time ago, Mizuki," the prototype said, leaping down from his perch. "We last met more than a year ago," he hinted to the terrified man in front of him. After giving it some thought, Mizuki was unable to recall any past actions that might have resulted in him drawing this beast's wrath. Disappointed but not shocked, the prototype questioned, "You really don't have a clue, do you?" He breathed deeply. "Then I guess I'll have to remind you as to who I am." The change in tone caused Mizuki to back off a little, but he soon recovered his confidence because, although his master, Orochimaru, had given him a power, he had not yet been able to use it. Perhaps now he would have that opportunity. He smirked confidently and said to the prototype, "You have guts, threatening me like that. Don't you know who I work for?" He asked. "No, and I honestly can't say that I care either," he replied to the now enraged Chunin. "It doesn't matter either way, you're just another vile being I must rid the world of, though, considering our past, I think I'll enjoy this as well," he concluded. It didn't matter that Mizuki still didn't understand what this demonic creature was discussing. He snatched the Fuma shuriken behind his back and yelled, "Since you're going to die anyhow." Before hurling it at the beast in front of him, "You're right," he said, "it doesn't matter." He could have easily avoided it, but the prototype remained motionless rather than waiting until it was about to strike him. He reached out and caught it with one hand with ease. After a brief glance at the shuriken, he turned to face the startled Mizuki. "Well, that was," he said, pausing for a moment to find the appropriate word, "anticlimactic," he concluded then. His face was expressionless as he surveyed the shuriken. After saying, "Catch," to Mizuki calmly, he casually flicked his wrist and threw the shuriken back at him. Mizuki became alarmed at the speed at which his shuriken was returning to him. With quick thinking, he sealed his hands a couple of times and then yelled, "Earth release, underground projection fish technique." He sank underground at these words, barely escaping his own shuriken, which lodged itself in the wall behind him. The prototype waited in a combat stance, but nothing materialized. He took a moment to look around. Well, he thought, since he's not approaching me from the left, right, or above, he must be coming from below. And he did indeed leap out of the way just in time to avoid Mizuki, who appeared from beneath him and swung a kunai at him. The prototype landed on the opposite wall of the room before lunging in Mizuki's direction and kicking the silver-haired man in the face with a flying kick. Mizuki flew across the room and then landed on the floor, rolling before coming to a stop. Holding his face for a moment, he stood up and looked in horror and astonishment at the demonic creature. He felt as though a horse had kicked him. The prototype said to Mizuki, "I really hope that wasn't the best you had, because if it was, you'd better give up now." Before the tattoo on his right elbow started to glow, Mizuki snarled angrily and challenged, "You want to see the best I have?" After that, his body started to change, growing larger and bulkier, and black stripes started to show up on his forehead and upper arms. He started to look more like a beast. Mizuki concluded, "You got it," and rushed forward. Just in time, the prototype leapt to the left. His speed has significantly increased, he thought as he dodged. He thought, "It almost reminds me of the cursed seal Sasuke used." Then Mizuki leapt for the prototype in an attempt to create an opening for a second attack. The prototype took hold of the man's wrists and they started wrestling. "Gosh, he's got more strength now. Forget the word. Almost. This is unquestionably similar to the cursed seal." The prototype thought. He came to that conclusion. A few seconds later, the prototype notices a gap. He tosses aside Mizuki's wrists, then crouches down to tackle the changed man before sprinting across the room with his arms wrapped around Mizuki's waist and carrying him. When he gets to the opposite side, he slams Mizuki into the wall, causing a tiny crack to appear in it. Then the prototype pulls away from the stunned Mizuki and puts his hand on the traitor's face. After that, he throws Mizuki across the room after forcefully slamming his head into the wall 3 times, widening the crack with each blow. Another crack appeared in the wall as Mizuki flew across the room and crashed into the opposite wall. Mizuki groans in agony and gets to his feet, holding his face. Then he turns to face his enemy, growls, and charges at him. Despite being tackled to the ground, the prototype is able to use his feet to raise Mizuki's body and throw the silver-haired Chunin over himself. As he leaps to his accomplishment, Mizuki slams into the wall after flying into another section of it. Mizuki stands up, growling at the prototype with even more ferocity than before. "That all you got?" the prototype asks with a smile. As his tattoo starts to glow once more, Mizuki lets out a furious roar. His body glows and starts to change again. He grew bigger and stronger than before, and his teeth and claws sharpened. More stripes appeared, this time covering his entire body, and his body turned orange after the metamorphosis. Mizuki had the appearance of a humanoid tiger. Before charging, he let out an inhuman roar. After recovering from his shock, the prototype started battling the traitor once more, but this time, he was easily overwhelmed and flung across the room, hitting the wall. Then he rolls out of the way, looking up just in time to avoid Mizuki's shattering punch. The two fighters squared off and started to circle one another. "Do you see now?" Mizuki asks in a bestial voice. "My master, Orochimaru, has given me ultimate power. No one can stop me now, not even you." Before he bursts out laughing, he looks at his demonic opponent. The prototype thinks and glares at his opponent, who is laughing. He is correct, he thinks to himself. He is stronger than me now, in terms of physical strength at least, and grins, but I wonder if his speed has improved as well. He lashes out at the still laughing Mizuki at these words, punching him hard in the stomach. Mizuki lets out a gasp and clutches his stomach in agony. Mizuki is then launched into the air by the prototype's uppercut on his chin, which slams him against the ceiling before he hits the ground a few seconds later. Mizuki stood up and growled at his opponent while massaging his chin. He said, "That was a cheap shot." "No, it wasn't," the prototype told the monstrous man in front of him, shaking his head. "You were preoccupied. I just exploited that fact and used it against you," he explained. Mizuki snarls once more before launching himself at the prototype. The prototype avoids contact. The prototype dodges again when Mizuki tries. This process was repeated. The prototype continued to dodge Mizuki while grinning. He was correct. Mizuki was faster than he was, but not as strong. "Here kitty, kitty, kitty," was his taunt to Mizuki. Anxious, Mizuki continued to lunge at his opponent, shouting, "Hold still, damn it." As he did so, "So you can grab me again?" "Sorry, not gonna happen," the prototype said, smiling as he dodged again. "Why?" he asked, smiling. "You're a fool, Mizuki. You are stronger than me physically, but you're much slower, and less agile, than I am. You should have known better. Sacrificing speed for power has never helped any warrior," he said, laughing at the man's attempts to catch him. With a growl, Mizuki lunges forward. He snatches the prototype by the waist. This time, after raising his demonic opponent into the air, he starts pounding him until he tries to split him in two. With triumph, Mizuki exclaims, "Ha! I have you now." As Mizuki crushes him, the prototype grunts under the pressure, but he quickly recovers. His fists transform into the muscular form he used on the stupid brothers after gaining it. Before slamming his enlarged fist into the man's face, he asks Mizuki, "Oh yeah?" When Mizuki lets go, the prototype slams his other fist into his face, causing him to drop to the ground and then stand up. After a moment of holding his face, Mizuki glares at his opponent once more in astonishment and rage. The prototype grins and extends his arm, using his middle and index fingers to make a "bring it on" motion. Mizuki roars and lunges once more, but this time the prototype grabs the man's fists and they start battling for control once more rather than avoiding. But this time, Mizuki is easily outmatched by the prototype. The prototype told his opponent, "You're good, very good," he said to Mizuki, "better than last time at least." Mizuki was growing weary of attempting to determine the first time he and this thing had ever met. He exclaims, "I've never even met you before." With a demonic smile, the prototype responds in his true voice, "Oh but you have, Mizuki-sensei." Mizuki relaxed his hold as his eyes widened in surprise. "No," he mutters in shock. "No, it can't be," in his bestial voice, which he says quietly for once. The fight is ended by the prototype using this moment of shock. Play God of War 3's Rage of Sparta. Mizuki is swiftly kneed in the stomach by him. Then he throws Mizuki across the room after grabbing him. The Chunin slams hard into the wall, creating another crack in the wall. The prototype then charges forward and starts hammering the man who resembles a tiger into the wall with his enlarged fists. The wall started to crack more and more as the blows continued to get harder. A few minutes later, the prototype stops and looks at the severely injured and bleeding Mizuki. He cocks his fist back at last and slams it as hard as he can into Mizuki's face. When the wall finally collapsed and Mizuki was hurled through it and outside, a sickening crunching sound came from her face. Music at the end. Outside the hiding place. A short while ago. Now, all 10 and 7 teams were together. Pakun was called by Kakashi, and he swiftly guided them to the hiding place. The teams halt. There, Pakun gestures with his paw to the hiding place. He should be inside that hideout and, he pauses, taking in the scent of the surrounding air. As the teams gazed at the small dog, Kakashi questioned, "What is it, Pakun?" He informs the others, "There's something else here, something dark. It almost smells demonic," he says, shivering as he takes another whiff of the air. They heard muffled banging sounds coming from inside the hideout before anyone could inquire what it was. What's that?" a terrified Sakura questioned. "But it sounds like it's coming from inside the hideout," Kakashi said in response to her. The noises were growing louder as the teams continued to stare. Choji yells, "Look," pointing to the second floor of the hiding place, "there's a crack forming in the wall up there." As he points, they all turn to see that a crack is indeed developing. The sounds were coming faster and louder with every sound. The wall crack widened. Ino asked the others, "Is something trying to break out of there?" "Looks like it," Pakun replied, growing increasingly apprehensive with every sound. The wall was cracking even more, and the noises were getting faster. The teams readied themselves for the impending event. At last, the sounds cease. Teams 7 and 10 paused to observe the silence and gaze at the crack. There was silence for a few more seconds, and then, Boom. A figure is seen being thrown out of the wall as it collapses under a tremendous display of force. A few yards from the teams, the body struck the ground, rolled over a little, and came to a stop on its stomach. They all gazed at it for a while. It had long silver hair on its head and was muscular. It had stripes of black on an orange body. It resembled a tiger, but it was more humanoid in appearance and lacked a tail. In addition to a chunky, organic substance, there was a lot of blood flowing from it, especially where the face was. The body started glowing before anyone could speak. Its mass and size started to decrease, and the black stripes and orange hue started to disappear after a while. It took on the characteristics of a man with silver hair and muscles. There was silence for a while. The silence was finally broken by Sasuke, who questioned, "Was that a cursed seal?" Kakashi paused to reflect. It did appear to be a transformation of a cursed seal. He pointed to the body and said, "I think so," to his student, "and I think that's Mizuki," he said to everyone. With a slight wince, Pakun walked carefully up to the body and sniffed it. "Yep, he's okay," the small dog informed everyone, "but I believe he's deceased." Kakashi approached the body and knelt down on it. He was closely followed by the others. The man's pulse was checked by the Cyclops. He affirmed, "Yeah, he is dead." Then, in order to see Mizuki's face, he turned his body over on its back. Or the absence of it. The sight caused everyone to gasp. No one would be able to identify the man if it weren't for his silver hair and aroma. The face was totally obliterated. The eyes, mouth, and nose were gone, and Mizuki's skull had been smashed into his head. It was leaking the repulsive stuff and blood. They soon discovered that the meaty, gray, blood-covered material was the remnant of Mizuki's brain. There were also pieces of skull. Pakun and Kakashi simply gazed in horror at the remains. Team 10 had to use all of their strength to avoid vomiting. Sakura did, in fact, throw up. The sight made even Sasuke, who had witnessed the murder of his entire family, turn green. What could have done this? Shocked, Sakura questioned. This was the question that everyone was asking themselves, but Ino knew the answer already. She noticed someone or something standing where the wall that Mizuki had been blasted through was. "Look," she said, pointing to the hole. Everyone's eyes widened as they looked up. The notorious demon was standing there in all its splendor. It was exactly like it was described in the bingo book. He also moved his arms back to normal. They were being shaken to their core by the glare it was giving them. Choji started, "Ino, is that?" She replied to her teammate, "Yeah, that's the demon." The words, "damn," came out of Choji's mouth. "Look at the size of that thing." There was utter silence for a few seconds before Sasuke asked, "What is it doing?" Kakashi responded, "I believe it is scouting us to see if we pose a threat." The demon glared at them for a few seconds before leaping in their direction and landing a few yards away, causing some cracks in the ground and causing the earth to tremble a little. With a gulp, Kakashi said to the others, "There's no reason to pick a fight with it. Everyone just backs up very slowly and carefully. No one makes any sudden moves." Everyone gave a nod, and they started to slowly retreat. Though he obeyed grudgingly, Sasuke was not as eager to move as the others. As they went, the demon gave them a glare. Then it squatted down like a lizard and cautiously made its way to the body. Then it gazed at it fixedly. The demon stared for a few more seconds, whispering, "What's it doing?" Choji asked. Returning the whisper, Shikamaru asked, "How the hell should I know?" After taking a moment to sniff the air, Pakun said to the others, "Something isn't right." Confused, Kakashi turned to face the small dog and said, "What do you mean?" "Its scent. It's strange, but it smells like several different people all at once," they were told. Ino inquired, "What do you mean?" "Most of the scents I don't recognize, but I do recognize two of them," he stated to the blonde genin. "I smell multiple people that I've met before. Anbu, I think. Two of them belong to exactly Raiga Kurisaki's and Aoi Rokusho, and the other smells familiar, but I can't quite remember where I've smelled it before," he said before departing. The demon's words roused them from their conjectures. It muttered, mostly to itself, "Another wicked soul sent to the pits of hell, the never-ending inferno." It took a sniff. "This one smells of treachery. To the ninth circle you will go, there you will suffer for your sins, accordingly." At this point, the group was unsure of what was happening. The demon now pretended that neither of the two teams was there. Meanwhile, Sasuke was growing impatient. This demon had prevented him from facing a formidable foe twice, and now it had the audacity to disregard him. He stepped forward. Kakashi appeared to be aware of what his pupil was considering. "Don't even think about it, Sasuke," he started to say, but Kakashi cut him off. "But nothing, do as I say," he said in a firm whisper. With a nod, Sasuke grudgingly retreated. The beast kept thinking while ignoring the shinobi that were standing close by. The beast got to its feet, used one foot to turn the body over, and saw Mizuki's face. It screamed in exasperation, "Jesus fucking Christ, are you kidding me?" The abrupt shift in tone and attitude, as well as the sudden shouting, startled and shocked the onlookers. "Motherfucking God. Damn. It swore, uttering the final 3 words independently while angrily kicking Mizuki's body. "Well, this is great, just fucking great. I told myself to calm down and not damage the brain, and what did I do? I damaged the brain." It continued to growl. "Great waste of time this turned out to be." The demon then calmed down. "Calm down, prototype. Don't get angry, take a deep breath, and breathe in deeply." "Ah. Much better," he said before examining his own body. Besides, it wasn't like he had anything valuable. I mean, his skills were in the low, right? So I guess I'm missing out on much. Okay. Job's finished. Another pile of human refuse is dead, and I got a little payback myself. It's a great day. As they listened to this powerful monster go from being philosophical to having a tantrum to becoming happy, the humans and dogs watching were in awe. The demon then turned to face the 6 humans and 1 dog who were observing it. "Sorry about that. My doctor says I have an anger problem I need to work on. Good thing I didn't beat someone to death with their own spine like last time." The others who were watching were frightened. It smiled and said, "See ya around." Before scoffing away, "You can hold on to that if you want, consider it a gift," it said, pointing to the corpse. However, this type of shining was distinct. The demon vanished after getting covered in a black and dark red substance. The teams kept looking at the spot where the beast had been. Hakun said slowly, "What the fuck was that?" Before continuing. 3. Kakashi replied, "I don't know." The group recovered most of their shock after a few more moments. "Well," said Choji, "what do we do now?" "I guess we head back to the village with the body," Kakashi said with a shrug. The teams then departed after he hastily sealed the body in a scroll. Meanwhile, Ino was pondering. Was this demon Naruto, her beloved? How, if at all, was he still alive? She thought, "Is that you, Naruto? What happened to you? If it is, I don't care what you've become. I just wish I could see you again," she thought, wishing silently and fervently. She was going to have to confront him about his temper, if he was still alive, and show him how she handles it.
So that's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe to the channel for more awesome stories like this. Thank you. See you all in my next video.